Good day. Velcro wins the day. Welcome to Reloved Guitars. Yet another video in my time-honoured, long-winded format, which, although a couple of people sometimes say, why can't you edit your videos or do something shorter? It's just not how it works. And one of the reasons for this, I've said it lots of different times, but I'll say it again, is that I'm going to take warmoth off here, by the way. I don't really like the neck that I got off them, so I'm not going to promote them on my lampshade. Sorry, warmoth. Yeah, the thing about when you do something for a reason, you know, and when you have an idea about how your business works, you do it for a considered reason. And one works out how it's working along the way and one evaluates it. And what some people don't get is that first of all, when people criticize your format, if they do, what they don't get is they have no idea about what you set out to do, and so they only kind of evaluate it against their own I suppose aesthetic preference. So if somebody prefers a pumped, jumpy, quick, short, snappy video, if that's the kind of thing you prefer, then then sometimes they kind of judge any other format by their particular preference. And of course that doesn't make sense. It doesn't take context into consideration. So for me, my target market isn't that kind of person. So some people comment occasionally on YouTube and they say, oh, why can't you edit this, or don't give me, I can't bother to watch your video to see how this, that or the other works, why can't you just tell it me quickly? And the reason I don't is because, with all sort of respect and politeness, they're not my target market. And it's difficult for somebody to see that, because we've grown up a kind of generation or something of people, maybe not more than a generation, people generally sometimes can only really by default see things through their own view frame. So if it doesn't feel good for them, they assume it's wrong, as opposed to kind of considering that it might have been made that way for a particular market, and shock horror that it might actually work as intended for that market. So anyway, so that's why I don't do short snappy videos, because it's not what my market wants, and also for some other reasons, that there's absolutely nothing in it for me to edit it, right? Editing would take a ton of time, which I don't have. This isn't a massively profitable business anyway, and I don't have time to be creating entertainment for other people, regardless of whether I appreciate that they enjoy or get something out of my stuff. Well, that's a plus. Sometimes people are quite put out to hear that I don't make the videos for them, which doesn't mean I'm not pleased that they get something out of it, which I absolutely am, but first and foremost it's not for that reason. Anyway, so what we have here is another first in the workshop, and this guitar is a Richie Kotzen Fender Telecaster signature thing, which has come down to me after a slightly interesting history. And so basically this is bought new from Guitars and Keyboard, I think, about a year ago. That's what I'm hearing. Not much more than a year ago. And having not seen one of these before and not really being a fan of Richie, I don't really know this model at all, so I had a look around and see what people say. And the first thing is it seems to be very well loved. So it's a lot of very positive stuff about this guitar, which is cool. Second thing you notice is that it comes with a whopping price tag, about, well, I don't know, anywhere between 1650 and 1800 quid, depends on when and where and who was selling it. So it's a premium instrument, and so what we've got is a premium instrument. It's a signature guitar. It's a Telecaster with 2 DiMarzio pickups, a chopper and a twang king or something like that. I think that's not whichever the one's which, I can't remember now. And it's a bound thing with a nice it's got a flame top front, and it's got a nice, probably a single piece back, no, two piece, that looks like a line down there, 2-piece back. It's got a 1-ply pickguard. It's got chrome fittings, abalone or mother of abalone markers, dot markers, sort of semi-jumbo frets, medium jumbo frets. It's got a little metal gold claspy, well, not my favourite, them things, string trees, and gold bits and bobs, and some cutaways. There's one there, there's a belly cut there, or a rib cage cut, and a bit of a forearm slope as well. Now this one is just interesting, because this one came to me because apparently a few months after, or several months into owning it, it developed a buzz, and that buzz, well, hasn't really continued. It's now turned into nothing happening on the bridge and middle, sorry, the neck and middle. So the neck is not working, but nor is the middle, which you kind of hope you'd at least get the bridge out of it. But that's nice sounding. I like the sound of that DiMarzio. It's pretty good. But the things that strike me straight away about this guitar is, like a lot of these things, is first of all, the chrome is wearing off. The gold plating is wearing off, which is really thinly done for a premium instrument. I mean, I don't really know how you'd do any better, or whether you could put a thicker layer on it or something. I don't know, but it's coming off. It's wearing off within, I'm told, a year of purchase. Not just is it wearing off, but it's also got really crappy finish marks here, where you can see the sanding or whatever filing of the scratch plate kind of showing up here, and also it's bubbling, so it's going to rust away or something very shortly. This finish is going to just drop off in flakes. So I can't quite understand how this can be a premium instrument. What's happened to it is, I guess, from looking at the pictures, the ones online, they have one of those barrel fixing, inside the tunnel fixing things with a little hooked, toothed, I don't know what you'd call it, a little flange tang inside of there that holds these on, which I never like, because they eventually wear the wood and they tend to always come loose. So somebody's either fitted a different one or drilled the original one and fitted screws, which is a better idea in my book. So this thing has got lots of dings to it. It's been hard played for the last year, if that's how old it is. It's got wear down the side of both sides of the fingerboard. It's like a corrosion, maybe it's sweat or, you know, hard play, but anyway, it's kind of worn all the way down. I mean, I'm not really going to play much on it because it's only one thing to play. There's a tiny signal coming through on middle and neck, but it's massively reduced. You can barely hear it. It has got a load of punch on this this bridge pickup. I do like it, so it's a nice one. But the thing about this is, like I say, whenever I see these much loved signature things, I'm not, and I don't mean this in an insult, so please don't take this the wrong way, I'm not a fanboy of anything, not even of, I guess the nearest thing I ever came to fanboy was the Brian May Red Special, and only because in many ways I just like the intellectual thought process behind it. You know, Brian May and his dad managed to build a near perfect instrument, you know, very early on in his career, which is, you know, and then it became legendary and so on and so on, because it kind of drove his career. But apart from that, you know, these, I've never wanted to buy one just because my hero had one. And actually, the truth is, when I got the Brian May one, I found that there wasn't enough about it apart from copying Brian May, but there wasn't enough about it that suited me to make me want to keep it, so I sold it. But I still love the design as much as ever I did. So I'm not somebody who would buy a guitar because some hero uses one particularly. But this one, even if you did, I'm trying to work out how this is so much more money, why this is so much more money than, you know, let's say, I know I always refer back to the classic Vibe, for example, which is a really capable and very nicely finished guitar. And what we've got here is a big, chunky, traditional Telecaster neck, which I know a lot of people like and some people hate, but it, you know, it's a nice big, big, deep C-shaped neck, really. And I know it really fits certain people. But you know, you go, okay, I've got a flame top, which is pretty. I've got some cheaply chromed stuff, but this where things start to go for me, even worse for me, is you've got these lowest cost pots in here. Now I haven't got under here yet, and we won't go further under here just now, but you know, the previous owners have looked under here because they've tried to fix the grounding problem, and they've taken some pictures of what's under there, and it is pretty low cost parts. Now I'm not one of these people who believes that, you know, paying for when you pay for a CTS pot, you can even hear the difference. Some people insist you can. I'm not even sure you can, but that's just personal, right? But if you're making a premium guitar at this kind of price range, you really, your customer will open that up and expect to see a pot with brass components in it. Now this is a two-way rotary switch, and so who knows what options they had in the components. But then they have a Goto, this may be a replacement one, but the original one's a Goto one in a plastic housing, the switch in here. And it's a three-way switch, and even that doesn't look like, you know, maybe you'd expect an Oak Grigsby or something with, you know, more expensive parts in it. You're talking premium stuff here. You don't want your chrome to wear off in a year on a premium guitar. I'm sorry, but you know, you can't just be paying for a lacquered on facsimile of an artist's signature. That isn't worth £1,300 more than a classic Vibe, for example. Now, okay, you're getting your DiMarzio pickups, which are nice. You're getting a flamed maple top with a binding, okay. And is this? Oh, maybe I'm wrong. This is telling me it's a two-piece. Well, it looks like it could be a two-piece, but I could be wrong if I can't follow the line exactly. No, it is a two-piece. It's joined down there. But yeah, you know, oops, there you go. So anyway, so I'm not, as you can tell, I'm not massively whelmed by this. I do like the sound of that pickup. It's got pretty hefty strings on here, which are different to me, but it is set as a kind of real power chord players. Well, I don't know, maybe some people can bend strings of this. But you know, I'm still not massively astonished by this for all that money. However, it seems to get really high ratings. People love this, and it can only be, when it's all said and done, it can only be the way the neck plays and the quality of these pickups, because like I say, some of the other bits are really not really great quality at all. But there you go. Made in Japan. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to be, I think, probably the third person trying to look into this issue. Now, when I first saw this, I saw the diagrams, I saw the rotary switch, and I thought it was going to be some quite complex thing. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. Nothing in wiring is ever easy, but the actual wiring on here or the functionality is quite limited. So you have humbucker, single coil, you've got a three-way switch, you've got a master volume, no tone, a new rotary switch switches the two pickups between a parallel mode and a series mode, and that's all that this switch does. That's all. Now, you could have done that with a toggle switch and kept a tone, but obviously this is a and sorry, the other thing is this is reversed. The the what's-its at this end. You know what I mean. So anyway, but you know, so it's not massively complex. So I'm hoping it won't be anything that's broken that will provide too much trouble to put this right. And I really think that although I'm going to have to use this original Fender two-way rotary switch because I don't have access to another one. You can't get the part anyway for love or money by the looks of it. But you could, you know, some people have, when they've had to replace it, they've modified it with, well, they've used other programmable rotary switches, which you can. They have something like a maximum six positions, but you can. What do they call it? Break to make to break, or something. It's a kind of thing where I think you can kind of define what you want at the beginning, and then it's limited to those 2 positions if you want only 2. Anyway, so I'm going to be looking at, and the intention is to put this right so there's no grounding buzz, and certainly that we get back this neck pickup. I'm going to need to test that and make sure that's even working before we go trying to rewire it. So that's the second sort of stage of it. There's 2 phases really. The first phase is going to be to do the usual in that order. So what I'm going to do is look at setting the action on here, modifying the action first using obviously these sacrificial strings, and then once I've done that I can take the strings off, take the neck off, and we can concentrate on the wiring and also give everything a clean up as much as possible. Yeah, so we've got these nice gold gotos. See, at least the gold chrome on these gotos is staying in place. So the goto have used a better quality. Well, I mean, it doesn't get as much wear as this bit here, where your kind of fingers might touch it. But you know, at least the chrome on the gotos is not fading at all, whereas it is down here. I mean, the top of the knob is almost gone, gone silvery. That one's a bit better because it doesn't get as much use. But here on the edge of the bridge plate, it's nearly chrome now, which is weird. But up close, it's not a nice looking thing. You can see file or sanding marks on the whatever they did to this stuff under the metal under here, and it's kind of sticking through. I don't know. It seems to be coming through on the underneath the chrome. Maybe I imagine. No, you can actually see there. It's not even a smooth piece of steel or alloy under there. It's kind of got striations, so it's sort of fairly crudely made, and then it's been electroplated. But I'm going to take some close-up pictures with my phone on this, but you won't really be able to see very well. Sorry about the noise in advance. Ready? Close your ears. So down here, where's my pointing thing? Oh, no, it's a piece of thread. That won't do. Oh, come on, that'll do. So I don't know if you can see it, but I'm looking down here. We've got bubbling under the chrome, or the electroplating, or whatever it is. It's going to come through, break through. And we've got this, how well you can see that, this kind of silver bit here. These are still reasonably intact. But anyway, yeah, not fantastic for a year old. So anyway, the thing I'm going to do is look at improving the playing action on this. And at the moment, the first thing I can tell you is that the first fret action is fairly high on some strings and a little bit different on all of them. I'm going to lower the action down and see how it sounds. I mean, with the nice big chunky strings, gauge of strings, it does have a nice solid feel. You could imagine playing this at a gig or something and feeling confident in it. But we'll see what we can do. A couple of quick observations. Very well, maybe about 0.2 mils of relief, which is okay. Nothing unusual about that. The neck itself, yes, you can see the relief. It's fairly consistent. Hello neighbours. Fairly consistent. Don't think there's anything worrying about that. When I get close up and look at the frets on here, they astonished me really. They are incredibly worn for a year. I mean, the owner of this, whose name is Dan, must play the living daylights out of this for sure. It's really played hard. The bone in this, it's kind of been worked, so not even sure it looks like it's well fitted, so it must be the original fitting, because it's not like it's been dug out and possibly not replaced, I don't know, but it's not your typical, it's not a new bone, it's an actual bone, so and it's got sort of imperfections, there's some bleaching on the outside and then some of the natural unbleached colour in the middle, so but yeah, these things have been worn like crazy. They are pretty flattened in some places. Well, they're fairly flat topped, I should say. They're not below a you know, a workable life, but they've been kind of either played really hard or somebody's worked on them, maybe because of some fret unevenness or something like that in the past. And there's quite a few dings down the side where something's banged into it, and chips where the lacquer's been kind of dug into. So with this, and more now I'm doing with all expensive premium guitars, premium priced guitars I should say. I'm taking the time at the beginning to photograph as many of the visible dings and stuff. I had a recent experience, unhappy experience of, very recent actually, of somebody claiming I put a little crack on some paint work or something, which I certainly did not, and it was a second-hand guitar, and this person started to examine it with a kind of electron microscope, and I have a feeling there were some issues that I had to put right on it, but I have a feeling that you know, when sometimes people miss something and then it's all too easy for an owner to decide it was you if they're not feeling good about the whatever's had done, and it can very quickly become, oh, I've just noticed this, you did that, and it's a really unhappy place to be in. And I don't like the idea of having to go over something like a hire car and photographing things, but I think if you're going to do this, it's a smart insurance policy, because you know, and also in the case of this one, I went back to the person who sent it to me and said, you know, this is pretty, I'm just letting you know, this is pretty well scuffed and beaten up. You know, it's I just want you to know that, so that it's like not a surprise when it comes back. I mean, there are sort of chunks taken out of it, buckle rash all around the back, loads of dings all round, dings on the edge, chunk taken, a big fingernail sized gouge on there, and loads of little dings up and down, including on the headstock as well. So there are plenty of war wounds on this, and I don't want to ever be in that situation again of somebody thinking that I've made a ding on their guitar. If I did, I would completely take responsibility for it. That's part of what Reloved Guitars is sort of based on, just straightforward. Anyway, that said, so this first part should be relatively straightforward. I'm going to reduce the action, and then after doing that, then I'm going to clean up the guitar, get the playing action the way I want it, and then move on to the electrics, which I'm not going to sort of do in real time on video. Well, I guess what I mean by that is I'm going to work out what's wrong with it, and then I may show some of the tweaking, because it's a slow and can be a slow and confusing process because you know, it's just hours of looking at little things on your phone and trying to find little hints and ideas of why something isn't working. So let me just have a feel what's happening here. Okay, so there are little various heights, just one or two a fraction over. They're not too bad, but currently it feels quite high to play, certainly down this end. Yeah, so I'll just take a very small, make a very small adjustment on them so that they've all got the same height, and I'm going to go a conservative 0.4 so that we're not, because if this is going to be sort of a big heavy rhythm guitar gauge of strings, and we're not going to want to put it so low that you know, you're going to get string slap on the first fret. We don't want that. Okay, so let's just go in and see. This actually might, one or two of these might actually be on the 0.3 mark to begin with. Now I think I'm actually going to leave this for a minute, because I know that of the two places, the last fret action is the one that's going to take the most reduction. So let's concentrate on that, and then we'll do the fine tuning of the first fret afterwards. You might find that once we take this down, we're close to where we want to be anyway. So at the last fret here, I've got about just over 2, which would be more than I would want. So let's see what happens if we go down with that. And we're looking at 1.5. Time to take the scarf off. I'm beginning to warm up a little bit. Stay. What I also will do, because the light isn't brilliant, I'm going to put my grandfather's reading specs on. They're not really my granddad's, but okay. It's just over. So come down a little more, and then the idea will be to have a feel to see what it plays like. So we go from 1.5 to 1.2, knowing that this is what looks like a 9.5 radius, so it's likely that it's going to, you know, not likely, the geometry is quite tricky to get all the bends out of it on with a low action on a tight radius. Not impossible, but just a little harder. It actually is nearly impossible on a 7.25 to get the ultimate low actions that I tend to go after. Just let's go the right way, shall we? The geometry of, as I call it, pushing a string uphill with its anchor points remaining at the bottom of the hill. So you just lose the clearance you need. Okay, so we're going to take these down a little bit more. These are quite high up. Which we'll see. We'll get the big moves done first and then make some tweaks. Fine tweaks as we go. Okay. Now I'm not sure about the fret heights and this, and whether it's going to play okay or whether it's going to, you know, choke off or whatever. But we shall see in fairly short order. Now, I have to say, for a premium price that this attracts, I'd be kind of hoping that the frets would be good enough in terms of levelness to play right off at the chosen action. But you never can tell, so you can't assume anything. So let me just put this on here. Get the right glasses on. I keep thinking of getting a better tuner than this. A little bit fuzzy now. not too bad, but there is a little bit of zizzing that would be nice to clear out, and partly, if it was that on its own, I might not suggest fret leveling, because that improvement would be quite marginal. But the fact that they're quite worn anyway and flattened off, which means they could certainly benefit from being re-profiled and polished out to spruce this neck up, makes me think that it's worth doing. So I will proceed with that. Now, having done the adjustment downwards here, then we can revisit what's happening with the first fret actions. Yeah, pretty good. A little bit varied, but basically not a million miles off, but maybe the A and the D mostly are high, but the others are yeah, I think we'll have to go to the 0.3 on all of these, because a couple of them are already there, and the other ones are a bit off the mark. So what I'll do is I'm just going to work these from the D outwards. That's pretty much close to the mark. What I want to do is, when I get my little, what do you call it, wherever it is, my little triangular file, I just want to help these slots by opening them up a tiny fraction, because even with bone, even a slight depth of slot will grip the nut, which we don't want it to do. That's almost on the mark, so I'll be very I don't know what the word is, limited in the use of the thingy, the file. I'm looking for the air gap underneath. See the shadows. I can see the shadows. Okay, so pointing the angle back, the same angle as the strings breaking over the nut. There you go, it's just on the mark there. Good. Yeah, so the plan will be, when I think of fret leveling, quite often, you know, it's a mixture of factors that make the decision. So sometimes people bring a guitar and say, oh, I've got this fret wear on the lower frets, and can you fret level it to clean it up? And sometimes the frets are otherwise in such good condition. For example, there's no buzzing notes, or you know, issues like that. And sometimes I would say that the dents in the lower frets are, in some cases, purely cosmetic, or mainly cosmetic. I'm not purely, mainly cosmetic. In other words, you can see them and you know they're there, but actually in real terms they don't directly impact or interfere on the way the guitar plays. So in a case like that, I would probably recommend not making an adjustment, because it's a pity to remove fret life for what is essentially more than anything a cosmetic improvement. And then there are other times when it's a mixture of things, some of which are on their own marginal, like the dents here, but the fact that these frets are also flattened means that upsets the intonation very slightly and would benefit from being adjusted. See how close we are there. Not far. And this nut is quite sticky material, believe it or not. The reason I do this slight V thing is if the string sits in any way in a slot of any depth, then you run the risk of the string dragging against the sides and creating friction. The thing about having a very slight V on whatever slot that you do have there, it just opens up the slot a little bit and stops the string dragging, so it reduces the chances of it sticking. That's still a pretty big gap under there. So this bone is actually, maybe because it's unbleached in the middle, it's actually proving quite difficult to cut or to file. Actually, there we are. Although, for my preference, bone is by far the most dependable material when it comes to how it cuts. Tusk is a great material to use, but I find it has a slightly shaggy composition, or fibrous I should say, and because of that it doesn't, in my experience, when you're doing this kind of cutting, it doesn't cut with quite the same precision. I'm looking back at this, I haven't quite got there with the previous one. I've wimped out, as I quite often do. Ouch. I cut my finger yesterday. Thank you. Still a gap. Of course, the secret of getting the right height is obviously you've got to cut the front edge of where the string goes off to get the reduction in height. If you keep just cutting backwards at an angle but you never reduce the front lip of that slope, then you won't obviously get the correct height. It's a very, very slow process. There we go, very close now. As some of you may have seen, I'm more and more using adjustable nuts, including making adjustable Telecaster ones, which I've got one here, strap and Telecaster ones. So to give you an example, this one's made out of tusk. So I tap it and put my own grub screws in, and then I make a couple of tiny little holes tapped and recessed into there, mixture of drill, tapping and flattening down, and it sits in there, the little feet sit in the hole. It's interesting that it works very well. I've done it on several guitars and no problems at all with how it plays, but some people have said, oh, doesn't that affect, you know, the transfer of the tone, because the thing's sitting on just two little metal grub screws, and that's true, that it absolutely is. Then when you think about it, on a typical Les Paul bridge, everything is everything is standing on two relatively small, compared to the bridge, bushings or posts. So it's I keep going back to this one before. Yeah, so it's not what seems to matter most is the solidity of the how the string is held in the nut, and I would probably be concerned if it was an acoustic guitar, because it is critical to transmit the vibrations through the bridge and the nut into the body of the thing, because that's an acoustic process. But I guess with it seems that with an electric guitar, the thing that matters most of all is the stability of the fixing points, and if the fact that it's standing on two grub screws doesn't negatively impact that stability of the anchor point, then I don't think there's an issue. It doesn't appear to be a problem. It works really well, and the thing about that is it allows you to get a very good first fret action and modify it over time if you want to. you know, tune it to your preference. There we go, I'll stop there. Okay, we'll just check these top ones because they're nearly there. So yeah, I've been doing them and they seem to work pretty well. Haven't got any issues with them. Got one lined up for JT's next guitar, which is in the offing. Again, you know, if it ever turns out that it doesn't work ideally, then we'll replace it, or we refit a traditional nut. But as I say, I've been pretty impressed so far. I'm very close on this one, so I'm only going to give it the tiniest of goes. Very near. Twang. I think this might be, no, this is a bit higher. So these are, yeah, as you can see, these are very small adjustments indeed, very tiny, but important to make because they can transform how the guitar feels to play. Again, just going down to the near the bottom of the slot to get that widened out a little bit. It's hardly noticeable, but it's just enough to free up the gripping power. Ideally, you wouldn't need to do that if the nut slots were absolutely optimal depth, meaning sometimes what I'll do if I'm doing a nut from scratch, I'll cut the slots to the right height and then I'll take it back with once the strings are off, I'll cut it all back with a file and try and leave just a third of the string's diameter, you know, like a little indentation. But sometimes you can get it so easily wrong that you don't have enough to hold the string when you bend it, and that's more annoying than anything else, so you can't really take risks with that. So having a bit extra depth is better than having not enough, and as a result I'd rather use this slot notching just slightly to relieve that grip. And it's still too high, but yeah, then I'd rather do that than to risk having it jump sideways when somebody's playing. So anyway, slow process. Somebody just asked me yesterday where I got the nut files from, and I get them from a Canadian seller on eBay, or I got them, I haven't bought some for a while. I bought them from a Canadian seller on eBay who, I think his seller ID was Jap Art, and I don't mean any racist, nasty stereotypes by using that expression. That was just the name of the seller, or the ID of the seller. That's my disclaimer. Okay, we're good. And the files are, they've got long-winded names on them, but I can't see it now because I've covered them up. But they're called, their broad title is Hiroshima nut files, and there's a few other Japanese words thrown in. But Hiroshima nut files, you should find them. Okay, so we're very close on this last one. What I'm probably going to do is just very lightly score the, put a little notch into it and leave it as such. Fine. And that sounds good, feels good. And now the next bit, I'm going to just slack the strings off for a minute so I can mark up the frets. Now, this is one of those situations where this is somebody else's guitar and it's a premium beastie. So what I'm going to do, it's a bit unusual for me, I wouldn't do this if it was mine because I trust my marker pen abilities, but because it's someone else's and I can't afford to be playing catch-up or remedial action games with their fingerboard, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the strings off for a minute and I'm going to start. Am I going to do this? Why am I going to do this? No, I can't really do this because, no, I'm being silly. Am I being silly? No, I'm not being silly. I know what I'm doing. Hellfire. I'm going to take off these here strings and I'm going to mask off the fingerboard before I even do the fret leveling. I knew I was not mad. The reason for this is so that I don't make any mistakes and slip with the pen. If it was a new marker pen, I would feel much more confident, but it's an older one. It's getting a bit shaggy, which means the chances, the likelihood of slipping and marking the fretboard are greater. The other thing with a gloss, if you have a gloss fingerboard, it's actually quite a lot easier to clean generally if you get fret dust on it. But the thing with these here satin finish ones is they can very easily kind of pick up a dark stain if you're not careful, or a smudge, and that can be pretty unforgiving and difficult to remove. So I think it's just a good insurance policy to kick off with. God, these strings are sort of been tied on in a funny sort of locking way, which is a bit of a pain to undo. Now sometimes these strings break at this point when you're taking them off after a hard life, but these are a heavier gauge, so I think we get away with that. And I also want to be able to refit them just one more time in order to do the fret leveling, because as you guys know, I do this under tension, so that, and strung up so that the guitar is in playing condition, playing configuration, I suppose. Alright, so I'm going to start with my masking tape game. This is low tack masking tape. There's no real way around this, it's about the safest option you're going to get. Some people like to use the fret protector strips, but I don't find that's a practical alternative. It takes too long, and actually there's too much movement in my experience to make them practical. So I use low tack masking tape as much as I can, and also put a bit on there for good measure. And then I'll do this all the way down up to, what I'm going to do is go off camera while I do it, because I've got to cut a whole set of strips to do the closer together frets, obviously. So I'll go off camera for a minute. I don't know, yeah, these are really flattened. It's quite surprising. I mean, either Dan is a fiendish, prodigious player, or this somebody's leveled them before, or third option is that for some reason Fender's used a very soft metal, because these are worn quite a lot. I don't think they were. I mean, it's not. By the way, I'm not saying that because they're low profile, because quite often, a custom guitar will have a particular gauge of frets on that might not be to my taste, but they will be correct for the guitar model. But in this case, they're not just low; they're flattened off, like they've been either worn or levelled in the past, but not re-crowned. Now, you never know. Some factories seem to do that anyway. And it's a trademark of the factory that they start by levelling the frets but not re-crowning them. But these look quite seriously worn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hang this back up, cut my strips, man, and come back when it's all marked up, ready to fret level. So I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so we have the guitar masked off. We have the truss rod adjusting, the leveling tool ready to go. And are you going to stay on there, camera, or are you going to fall off? I wonder if this would be better. Hook you up round here. That would sort of take some of the drag out of this. Oh, there we go. Anyway, so I'm now going to do the, I've tuned it, I've calibrated it to the curve in the neck on this first E track, as I call it. So I'm ready to level the first track. Now I'm expecting to see a lot of metal very quickly, and for a newcomer to this technique that could be quite a shock. You might find yourself thinking, oh my god, what have I done? I've taken tons of metal off. But actually what's happening here is, if anything, you are going to be taking a little bit, but you'll be going down to the level of the existing flat spots, so they will show up pretty quickly as quite flat. But you have to remember that you didn't flatten that out, if you get what I'm saying. Now, the nice thing about this method is you can do a couple of things which you can't do on the flattening the neck and using a flat beam method. Is, first of all, you can test every note. So what we've got here is a low fret and a high one next to it. So that's a little bit up there still to kind of look at. But yes, so you can test it. Oh, and you can test each note. That's the advantage. And then what you can also do is, each time you do anything, if you're not certain, you can recalibrate the tool. And this isn't the most sensitive or adjustable of tools, so it may, that's still on, so it tends to hold its shape quite well. Some of the more flexible truss rods I use at times can flex or unwind a little bit as they go. So basically just using this tool to take off any high spots in this curve, because the tool is as curved as the neck is, so it's the same, because they match, it's the same as leveling with it flat. So there we are. So we've got quite an interesting thing going on here. I know that I'm matching the curve, and this is giving me an impression that these frets that look pretty flat down here, I'm not even get close to touching them. There's a cluster up here that are fairly high, there's a cluster in the middle that are cutting, and actually there's a couple of two low ones there, and then the rest are cutting here, which is what I expect. If it cuts all the way across, it means I've matched the curvature correctly. If it only cut in the middle, it's too curved, the rod is too curved, and if it cuts at the ends, it could be the rod is too straight. But what it's showing me is I've got the curve, the general curve of the neck, but because it's showing me up these frets as not even being touched, and yet these being touched quite heavily, I can't help but think these have been worked on in the past, because there's no natural way these would go down to become that much lower than the surrounding frets unless they've been worked on. And that's could be the danger of working on them with a less physics-based simple approach that I'm using here. There you go, all those notes are clear. Now for the action I've chosen, right, I don't need to continue down to make sure everything has got cutting up, right? It's just an observation that I think these you would say that these three are high, which they could be. You would say, looking at this pattern here, that these three are high, which they could be. Then suddenly these six aren't, and then this block here, apart from the last one, are high. And the tendency is that when you get groups, when you get the match, I'll draw it just to make a point. Excuse me. When you get the match of your radius in your neck, and you curve your tool to match that, okay, and then what you find is these are cutting here, and these couple are cutting here, and some are cutting here, right? You know you're on the right thing, but when these are under here in quite big numbers, okay, what it means is somewhere in the past these have been lowered down below the rest of these, and that can sometimes be the result of somebody doing a kind of a hand adjusting. I don't want to go that way, I want to go this way, sorry about this. Yeah, it can be sort of, sometimes people, I'm not saying it has on this guitar, but sometimes people can work a particular group of frets because they know they've got a problem in that area. Now as it stands, we can afford to leave this as it is because we've got down to a playing action. We've got enough levelness for the playing action that we've chosen. All right, so I don't have to worry about that going any further because we're not chasing an arbitrary absolute levelness. Okay, we're chasing enough removal of fret metal to make the action we've chosen play well. Right, and it's always worth bearing that in mind. Now, one of the downsides, if we don't get down to all the frets, and its consideration is, then are we going to be clearing up any of that cosmetic damage caused by wear? And again, the kind of decision point comes in here. So I can say to you that, so we're taking quite a bit off here. You can see the dust, take quite a bit off here. These are two high ones in the whole kind of sequence. These are still low as expected, and this one here is low, and that one's just getting clipped. And what I'm finding here is that because this one is low, well, we're seeing the dent showing up in here. We've not got the dent out of that one yet, and we've not got the dent out of this one and this one, and we're probably not going to get the dent out of this one. However, because it's not massive and doesn't affect play, if I get the dents out of it, it's going to be a cosmetic plus, but it's not my primary objective. A little bit more at this top end. Yeah, it's not my primary objective, so I'm not going to take away the life of the I'm not going to throw away fret life in exchange for cosmetic improvement. That's what I'm trying to say. Only, however, when there are other things involved, then we do throw away fret life in exchange for, in this case, levelness at a low action, get the bends freed up so we can play them, and I can see where these frets are high, so those will interfere, those will be causing zizzings. Problem with this is that these are low, and that will potentially cause ziz notes to go zzz down at this end, and that's kind of a limiting factor because your bendability on a 9.5 radius on any guitar, but particularly when the radius is fairly tight, bendability is dictated by the low spots, and here we have a visible low spot. So we expect, that's not bad, there we go. We expect if we bend using these frets as our target frets, we expect, because they're low, even though we've clipped quite a bit off these, or relative amount off these, we expect these to zizz out. You can hear it. It's better than it was. But that's only when we're crossing to the G, so we may still be only affecting by this, maybe these, we can clear that when we get to the G track. That's what I'm hoping. So now we're moving across to the G track, so I'm going to recalibrate the tool, and I'm just setting that off the double bit of tape because I know you can't do it all the way. Sometimes you get, you know, thanks man, my sticky plan didn't work. Okay, I'm going to need to get some of those expensive sticky tabs. I'll leave that for another. This was given to me by JT, a nice soldering station, but I will go and buy some custom sticky tabs to make it stick. But it's a real useful station because it's out of the way and it's controllable. It's got, actually, more importantly, it's got rubber cables on it, so it really makes soldering, moving the iron around a lot easier. Thanks JT, I'm really looking forward to using that on this guitar actually. Anyway, so now we're into the G track and we're expecting to see the same pattern of cutting continuing across all these frets. And again, as soon as you won't be able to see with this, but as soon as you take off the pen, you can see the damage in the fret, or the dent where the strings have worn it, because the black marker pen is caught in the gap. This thing doesn't take it off. It's left in the trough, if you like, or the little dent. So it gives you a good, and there's some there, and you can see the track of those cosmetic dents. But like I said, if we can get them out without too much fret metal loss, then great, but I'm not going to sacrifice a ton of metal when these frets look about halfway through their life at this point anyway. I'm not going to chuck away a ton of metal just for a cosmetic game. Okay, sometimes it may be that the frets get so worn that it is something you have to do because it's notchy or won't play. So the first thing on every level is I test the playability of the note that I've just done, sorry, the string. Tiny little bit there. Still a little bit up this end here. So now we want to go to the low spots which we know are here. Better. So that work on the G has freed up the bends on the B and the E, but we still need a little bit more work on the G itself to give those clean notes, and that's how it works. And you can't do it with any other method. This is the only way I've ever found to get this amount of precision and control over the process. If you try and imagine just hammering these frets with a file and armed with a fret rocker, what you can tell is, have you got an almost perfectly even set of frets? That's true, you can tell that. That's what that's good for. And I'm not knocking it, because it will give you, if you do it right, it'll give you a perfectly even set of frets. But the problem is, you don't need a perfectly even set. Good. All the way. That's good. Yeah, you don't need a perfectly statistically or, you know, mathematically level set of frets. What you need is the frets to be level enough for the action you've chosen to play well. Now I'm going to calibrate for the next track. Now this time it's showing me we are a little bit curved on the tool, and that is entirely possible because the radius of the neck changes very slightly as you go across it. Now that's about right, so I'm going to continue as that adjustment. Rubber spreader, and you can see the clouds of dust where it's cutting up. So it's showing that these were high, and these were high, and there's no lie in this. It's just physics telling you that. That's what I love about this system. This curve matching that curve, and together they work out how the frets need to be for the thing to play and give you back those tiny clearances. And they really are, as you know, tiny, and for that reason this method is both a blessing and a kind of a curse as well, because it allows you to set a very low action on most guitars with the least amount of fret metal loss. But what it also means, because the clearances are so small, nice, let's clean that up. The clearances are so small, it means that in fact it only takes a change in humidity or something to make a tiny adjustment to the neck, and that clearance disappears. Now I ought to be a bit more careful in putting sort of a disclaimer on these guitars and say, no, need to tighten, curve this a bit more now, and say to people, you know, please be aware that the clearances are so small that if this comes to your region, locality, you may require to make a small truss rod adjustment. And those are the only things that change, really, are the truss, you know, in a fixed thing with no tremolo. It's going to be the neck relief may change, and it's something that people just need to be able to adjust anyway. It's not a smart thing to have a guitar of any price band and not be confident to adjust the truss rod, or to understand fundamentally what it does and why you would adjust it. And it's not helped, that situation isn't helped by so much misinformation. When you go online and you look in a forum and you see clearly that some people are giving advice to others from the assumption or their understanding that the truss rod is there to adjust your playing action. So if you have some problem with your playing action and somebody recommends you crank the truss rod to change your playing action, walk away from their advice, because they don't understand what the truss rod is for. What's true, this is where they've got confused, is that adjusting the truss rod will result in a perceived change in your playing action close to the center of the guitar, because as you bend it more, the strings are going to sit higher. So yes, they're right, cranking the truss rod will, as a secondary effect, lead to a higher action in the center of the guitar, but it is not the primary means by which you would want to adjust your playing action on your guitar. The primary means of adjusting a playing action is, as I've shown here, which is adjusting the first fret action through adjusting the nut, and adjusting the last fret action by adjusting the bridge. And then, along with that, the truss rod's purpose is to allow you to control the degree of bend of the neck. The secondary consequence of having bend in your neck is that the action in the center of the guitar increases or decreases, but it's kind of irrelevant to the idea of setting your action. The reason you set the relief in your curvature in your guitar neck is to allow your strings to have room to spin. Theoretically. Hey. Nice chord, whatever that is. Okay. It's the only place you'll get it struggling at all, just slightly there, but for this action that's absolutely fine. I would, if you absolutely had to iron out, if you were going to do a big bend and that was not acceptable to you, then I would raise this by a tiny fraction rather than try and take any more fret metal off. You can see now it's taken a fair bit of metal, or some metal off there. It's taken some off there and some off these three, and we're left with these clusters of frets. Actually a little bit better on the bass side, but you can see on the treble side they're hardly touched. And for that to be that way, and for them to still look so flat when you look at them with the naked eye, then frankly those have been hit on before, whether in the factory or afterwards, I don't know. Now looking back on this, we've got most of the dents out, except where the frets are a little bit lower, like this little patch here, and up here you'll find we'll still see, but it's minor, right? And from my perspective it's not important enough to cost you any more fret life. It's as simple as that. Now at this stage in the game, having leveled the frets now for this gauge of strings and this action that we've set, that's all you're doing. It's a composite of those things. This setup is not for any gauge of strings, right? Because a different gauge of strings will load the neck differently, and therefore it won't or will or won't bend as much, in which case it will change how the strings how the strings relate to interact with the neck. And if you wanted to change the relief because you wanted more room in the middle, more height in the middle for the action, for example, or you felt that the strings need more room to spin, then consequently the other feel of the other ends, the other parts of the setup will change too. So it is a specific thing for a particular action, gauge of strings, and a particular setting. So just have to remember, and that's only because they're interrelated. These different what do you call them? Variables are interrelated. They're separate but interrelated. They're consequential on each other. Anyway, so that is the basic setup part done. Insofar as we now have a nut cut so that there's no sticking of the strings, whether there was or not, there isn't now. We've got that cut to allow the strings to move to give you a good first fret action. We've got we've set the action down here for a good last fret action, and we have leveled to iron out the slightly zizzing bends in between. Now having done that, we can proceed onwards to finish the work on these frets, which we can leave the action down here, by the way, exactly as it is. We don't have to adjust or worry about it. We can now continue on, finish off the reconditioning of these frets by recrowning them in a second, and then after that, probably off camera, polishing them out with loads of different grades of sandpaper and micromesh. And then at the end of that process they will be ready to just reload with new strings later on and play, and that doesn't require any more adjustment so long as I use the same gauge of strings, and so long as I don't don't change the action down here. Even if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to clean this plate, which I probably don't really want to do too much to it since I know the chrome is so thin. Even if I wanted to take it all apart and clean all these bits out, then it doesn't matter how I put them back on. I can reload it with the same gauge strings when all this is done, and then all I have to do is I have to just dial it back to the action I know, which is 1.5 on the last fret and a gradient down to just over 1 actually on the high E string, from low E to high E, and I can do that, and I know that the underlying levelness now will fall back into line with that gauge of strings. The neck will respond to that gauge of strings and we'll be back in the same place we were before, and I know that plays, and that's what this setup method is all about. Okay, so moving relatively swiftly on for me, now we've got a set of frets that are a mixture of flattened because I've done some work on them, and flattened even though I haven't touched them because someone else has done some work on them. But either which way, we want them all to be rounded like newer frets would be. It's not just a cosmetic thing. If you flatten a fret, you move what I call, it's not the right term, but you move the intonation forward. So just to recap on this, there's your original fret. Let's say that's the nut up here and that's the bridge down here, and the intonation is a function of, let's call this our bridge there. The intonation is governed by this length here, right? And it's got to be exactly X for that particular neck and the spacing of the frets. Okay, so and what you do is when you adjust your bridge, you adjust it backwards or forwards using the bridge saddles. Problem with this is that when you flatten the frets, as somebody's already looks to have done, either through wear or by adjusting it, what happens is the intonation point where the start of the measurement moves forwards to that point there, right? So now it's X minus, look at me being a mathematician, where's my mustard coloured Open University shirt? It's X minus Y, right? And that's a different length altogether. So flattened frets by default are not great intonations. So what we're going to do is we take what we know now is a nicely leveled fret, even though it's a bit flattened, and we're going to do something basically like that to it. And so we're going to kind of file away those funny shoulders and the flat spot, and then what happens is you'll see that replaces the intonation point backwards to the centre, which is still the good old centre of the fret as it was before we did any work on it. So there's the theory. Now honestly, how much difference does that make? Well, if a millimetre can make a difference at that end, a millimetre, sometimes you can get as much as a millimetre because of this big flat spot at this end or anywhere along here, so it can make a difference. So we take our medium jumbo fret file, crowning file, and I'm going to be standing ready with, I got a cut on my hand and I've just shoved some brass brush bristles into it. That's a nice torture for some film and war film in the future. Tell me the truth. No. Alright, going to take the medium jumbo side and I'm going to work the tops of these frets a little bit with the diamond coated what's it, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to just work them so that the curvature, the actually it's concave surface because the material's above it. The concave surface goes along the convex fret, and this curve here kind of grinds off the edge of the fret, and it gradually restores it to more of an arch shape as we showed on the Open University blackboard. And the masking tape, marker pen is just there to guide me, so I keep doing it so long as there's a little thin, I leave a little thin strip of marker pen along the top, because that untouched marker pen tells me I haven't scraped the top of the fret, and if I haven't scraped the top of the fret, guess what? then it's still all relatively level the way I had it a minute ago, after all of that effort doing the fret leveling, or should I say the precision fret leveling. Now, come on, don't give me a thumbs down for a crap accent, please. The whole of British comedy was built on crap accents, you know that. And toilet jokes. Anyway, not saying I like toilet jokes at all, but I do like a good crap accent, that's for sure. Anyway, except when it's in a film and they've got, I don't know, an English actor to play an American, like Hugh Laurie. I hate it when he's being an American. It just grinds away. Sorry, Hugh. Anyway. So this is interesting. We're now approaching the frets that I didn't hit with my leveling file, but in fact I'm just going to run over very quickly, and I'm going to take a close-up photograph of this because this actually demonstrates how significantly leveled off these frets were before I got anywhere near them. So you know for a fact, because we've just been through it together, you know for a fact I didn't level these, and I'm going to now photograph this to just show how much flattening has happened to these frets despite me not even touching them. So it is a clear sign that they've been flattened either through play or previously by somebody, and I have to say this looks to me like it's been done by somebody. It's always good fun doing detective work, because you can see signs of things. As I said to somebody just recently, it's impossible to work on frets outside of the factory without there being some kind of forensic traces of what you've done. It's nothing to do with your technique or how good or bad you are at, let's say, refretting or addressing the frets. It's just that the secret of forensics in real life is that doing things in the real world leaves traces. You'd have to be a superhero if you didn't, and in fact if you could do things in the real world without leaving traces, you would be a paid killer, because you would be able to commit regularly the perfect crime for money if that's your thing. So the truth is, no matter how good or bad you are, doing things leaves traces, and the same is true with guitar work. No matter how good and careful you are, more or less, sometimes more or less easily spottable, but nevertheless they leave traces. Okay, so that's the recrowning done, and I can, as I say, all of them were flat, even the ones I didn't touch, which is amazing. And the question follows is, how could the ones I didn't touch be flatter than the ones I did have to touch if somebody's done it all over and not actually stopped in one place and actually worked a bit harder on one particular spot? Don't ask me. Just gives me a sense that somebody's possibly worked a patch before to cure a problem. And who would blame anyone for doing such a thing? I mean, why not? Everybody tries to solve problems, and we all do it in different ways. Okay, so now the fun part is that I'm going to go off camera for, is I'm going to get a set of what do you call it, stuff, sandpaper, and I'm going to, I'm just going to have a big sheet of sandpaper. I'm going to make some strips, and I'm going to hand sand my way to tidy up these frets, followed up by a good going over with my trusty micro mesh. It's a bit old now. I probably could treat myself to a new set. Still works, but okay. So I have my 600, I have my 1000, and here I have 1500. Two 1500s. And when I reach the end of this, then I switch to the micro mesh, which starts off at a 1500. Somebody once said to me, or said somewhere, it must be true, somebody once said somewhere that a 1500 micro mesh is not the same as a 1500 paper. I'm sure there are differences, so I kind of I guess that the 1500 micro mesh is a step down finer than the paper, so I go from the paper to the 1500 paper to the 1500 micro mesh and carry on. And if there's a bit of a gap, who cares? If it's the same, who cares if we've done 1500 twice? You see what I'm saying? I'm covering all bases. I don't take risks, me. That's true, actually. I'm not a risk taker. Okay, so look at all of that dust. Yum yum. Now, the truth is, that dust would be knocking about on your lovely maple fingerboard if you didn't mask it off first. As I say, sometimes, as long as it's dry, you can brush it off. But if there's any hint of you getting it wet, and the worst thing is on a maple board, if you try and at this point get a cloth that's got naphtha or solvent on it and you try and brush that off, suddenly you've made sort of grey paste which loves to stick to maple, and it takes a while to clean off. Now what we've got here, by the way, is the old nut, which is perfectly functional, but actually it's a bit on the it's not shiny or anything, it doesn't have to be, it's only cosmetic, but it's definitely a bit of old bone. So I might, when I'm doing the 600, I might give this a little brush across just to polish it out. Okay, so I'm just going to, first bit I always work by hand, so I can just feel what I'm dealing with, and I'll then switch over to the foam blocks, and this will take a while, so I will switch over onto the radio and kind of veg out while I do this, and I'll come back when it's time to take the hardware apart. Now I'm not going to do that today. Told myself to just do this bit today, do something else, go away, collect my various bits of wiring diagrams and whatnot. I've got the original Richie Kotzen wiring diagrams and so on and so on. So I'm just going to get all those together and print some of them out and cut them on the whiteboard so I know where I am before. Because even if it sounds simple, it's clearly not totally simple, because it's caught out the owner and a couple of friends who've tried, or friends of the owner of this guitar, have tried to put it right for him. So, and by the way, I'm not casting any aspersions on them for doing, or for not being able to do it, because there is nothing totally simple about wiring. If you're not used to it, and I should know because I've spent hours pulling my hairs out, remaining hairs out. If you're not used to it, it can be a soul destroying challenge, because the simplest things can go wrong and you can't find out what caused them, and you can just find yourself in despair pretty quickly. So I don't blame anybody who doesn't do this all the time for getting dispirited and seeking help. You know, I used to dread. I'm not even 100% confident I can solve this problem. That's as simple as that. I'm going to do my level best, as always. But I've not seen this guitar before, and I don't exactly know what's under there. And the reality is, I'm probably be better off rewiring it from scratch than trying to work with what's there, because I don't quite know the source or the origin of what's there. I don't know who's done what quite with it in their well-meaning desire to fix it. Okay, so while I'm here, I'm just going to polish off the top of this nut a little bit with the 600, because why not? And before, it was just showing a few scratches, but it's a little bit shinier. Okay, camera off, radio on, come back when it's time to take it apart. Okay, quick check-in just to show you. That's what it looks like polished out. Alright, so plenty of muck has come out. Now all I'm going to do now is just take everything off. It's about half an hour of hand polishing to get it where you want it. I'm going to peel back the masking tape and peel it off. But it's good to protect the body and the pickups as well if you can. I mean, it very rarely gets any further than where you want it to go, so you don't have to, but for the sake of cheap masking tape, I would rather be able to pull that off and be done with dust getting onto everything, than skimping on the masking tape, which only costs about £1 per thingy roll. So small price to pay in consumables for making sure things stay clean. Anyway, so that's that. Pull off these bits here. Reveal the lovely maple finish. Okay, there goes that knob again. Thank you. So it's always interesting for me because I never truly know the origin of a guitar. I mean, I often get a bit of the story of it, but when it's been owned by a couple of people, you know, sometimes you don't, you know, sometimes even when somebody's a friend of somebody, sometimes you don't know the whole story. Sometimes people, it's possible people do things, I'm not saying on this one by the way, but sometimes people do things that they regret and don't say about, and you sort of find them along the way. You have to kind of work around it. You know, quite common, as I said, even on this one, you know, it looks like it's had more done to it than meets the eye to begin with. But who knows? Anyway, and sometimes, you know, that could be the one person in the whole deal who's got most to cover up, and quite frankly, that equals the factory who's selling you this thing. These people have to get this out the door. They're under the pressure that the buyer isn't. So it's not impossible that sometimes you'll see things that the factory's done to you know, get this out the door and sort of mask any issues. So there's absolutely no guarantee that a custom, or a, you know, what do you call it, you know, a top-notch designer signature guitar comes out perfect. I mean, I've just seen too many of them not coming out perfect, frankly, for that to be true. Okay, so I'm just going to use a bit of the old stuff now to get rid of the last bit of dust, and obviously I'm working with a lot less dust now at this stage than before, so I can afford to give this a clean down like this. If like I say, you don't want to mix lots of dust with your cleaning solvent, because that is when it turns into a sort of slime. So you can see there's still a bit on there, but you know, we'll go over it again just to be absolutely sure. This is good old naphtha, very inert and harmless to finish, guitar finish. So I can get some of the dust off here as well. Original grime, I should add. And then, okay, so then we've got that pretty much cleaned up, ready to go the next time. So the next phase for this thing is going to be taking the neck off, because it's not going to be of any use to us having the neck on at the moment. It's just going to be a hindrance. One nice thing is that the ferrules haven't dropped out, which is quite common. It just becomes something else you have to watch out for. So, okay, out comes, off comes the neck. It's quite a grip. Let's use this. That's what we've got it for. Now, when you do this, always make sure the bulk of the weight is of the neck is on the desk bench. Okay, gold. Now flip it over, hold it in, gently remove it. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, My stomach's rumbling. It must mean food. Oh, I must have food. Okay, nice, nice, nice. Everything nice. Clean off a bit of dust on the edge there. And then I hang this safely out of the way. That now is done for later on. Lovely shiny refinished frets, and actually almost all of the original damage is gone. The only bits I couldn't quite get to, but I've still polished out, are where they were on the low frets, but actually they're marginal, minimal, you can't see. So while it's off, let me just check the straighteners of it and everything. No twists. Nope, that's good. I'd hope not for that kind of price. Okay, so get me a piece of string. Yeah, so I'm going to take a break now, but actually before I do, I'll take while you're still here, before I take my break, I'm going to remove the covers and we'll see what we've got hidden in there. See what it looks, just so you can get a glimpse at the components. Really, that's the first thing I wanted you to see, is the components that they're using in this, because it just struck me as odd. I can imagine they used stuff like that. Okay, safe. Okay, so let's get another one of these, a smaller one. Let's get these off. Obviously I'm going to have to cut some wires here and there, but we're going to need to get under all of this. So let's start here. Okay, alright, so a little square. You need to be closer, don't you? You need to be closer. Still not tall enough. You need to be closer and taller. Hold on. Sorry. Velcro everywhere. Ah, there we are. So, the Richie Kotzen signature Stratocaster. So here we have 250k pot, and we have what is, I'm told, a Goto, switch, but it don't half look cheap. Sorry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a screwdriver. Oh, there's one. That's not quite the one I meant to use, but it's one that, no, it won't work. Find the small screwdriver. If you wonder why I say screwdriver, it's in tribute to the wonderful Luthier Galeazzo Frudua, who says that with his wonderful Italian accent when he speaks English. Right, okay, so there we go. Look, so we've not a piece of brass in sight on these pots, which surprises me. Why isn't that a CTS? Come on. And then we got some, now any of this wiring now could, well, that's not terribly handy. That isn't terribly handy. So it's all a bit yuck. But that's the probably the original switch. That's probably the original pot. That certainly is. So, and that's obviously off, and this is all a bit, soldering's all a bit eek. So we've got a wiring diagram, and obviously I'm going to refer to that. But it's going to need to, we're going to need to do some stuff. Now, one of the things that's good to do at this point in time is to mask off the surrounding areas. Now the thing about this is that my instinct is to strip this back and start again, right? And it may well do that since I've got the wiring diagrams and I have the sort of basic start point. But the first thing I want to do is I'm going to want to just use the wiring diagram to check it through and just to see what, if there's anything kind of obviously off the mark straight away that could explain. Apart from that, that's the connection is broken off here, but that would cut all sound. So that was just waiting to drop off. That's the hot output to the jack socket. So that's just come loose now because it's old and knackered. But what I'm kind of interested in is what's stopping the neck and mid positions working. And of course we've also got to When we do this, we've also got to know that we're getting the that's all over the place. Intonations akimbo. Yeah, we've got to make sure that we know what's, yeah, the parallel series thing is actually working. Okay, so my start point will be from here, and to go and get some wiring diagrams and track this through. We know that this baby's dead in the water, and pretty quickly we know that this one is also going to come off, so we can actually take the jack socket connectors right off for a second, and that leaves us a bit more room to play with. The wires, if these are the original wires, they're very tacky feeling. I mean, they're just really bog standard, but anyway, so here we have the sort of business end of things, which got a bit more movement now, and then we should be able to track everything through. That will be the ground from the bridge. This is the pickups. So let's take the ground from the bridge off for a minute. See, I'm halfway there already. Just because it clears some space out of the way, and it means we can move things without things being so stuck. So bridge ground tied back. So now we're looking at the business end, which is where do things go on the switch, and where do things go after that. So we're looking at what appears to be the ground wire from the neck pickup, the hot from the neck pickup, the pickups, the wires from the bridge pickup, and then all we have to do is make sure that these go correctly into the micro switch here, which we're going to want out of here to clean up. And this one's, I mean, it's a bit of a mess. It doesn't explain yet why it isn't working. Anyhow, we shall take this all apart. I think I probably will rewire it just for good measure, but I'll track everything through as we go. In fact, you know what? Oh, I love this. Come on, let's do it. Let's rewire it. I can see where things go. So that means I can take this off, and then we can just start afresh. And I'm also then have a clean run at testing the pickups. Sorry about the noise. Testing the pickups. The other thing too, by the way, is that I don't know, and presumably Fender knows better than me, I like to think, but there's no shielding in this thing here. Obviously there's a metal plate which acts as part of shielding, but there's no conductive paint to make a cage inside these things, and that's kind of like, well, I'd sort of hope to see that personally. Okay, we've got three wires coming through here, so both go to, ooh, hang on a minute. Okay, that one goes to there, and this one is going to the lug number 1. Okay, so 3 wires. We've got a ground that's going to the top, we've got a black that's going to separate, but they're two are going, those two are going effectively coming off the same thing. Alright, anyway, there we have it. So, nice finish and all that. Nice what, 5mm maple top, very lovely. Pick up over there, and then we have remains of the stuff over here. So in the end I'll probably end up cleaning all this up and taking it apart as well. So there we have it. We can sort of trace it through now. I'm going to stop for a bit, and we'll come back to this later on. But also, being fiddly, I can also give all this a bit of a clean too. Because you can actually get a major improvement with the smallest amount of good stuff. Number two, scratch remover polish. It's like it's kind of a new lease of life finishes. Built for guitars, used a trillion times, so absolutely no concerns about it on finish. And it is practically, if you're doing your own poly finishing or even nitro, this stuff along with micromesh, this stuff can bring you your finish up to an almost buffed looking finish. It's incredible how well it works. So that's a little go there. I'll treat this guitar to one, it's a very own new piece of cloth. Look at that, why don't you? And there you see, it's brand spankling new. Look at that. That's like it's literally like it's new. Apart from the dents, it looks like it's new. Okay, so yeah, we'll stop now and I'll go and get myself a cup of tea and see you a bit later on. But yeah, I'll come out with the diagrams, and I'm going to clean these back. I might even put a new CTS 250 in there, so there's a bit of quality. This obviously is a little Fender unit which I'm going to have to live with, but I don't see, I'm going to take it apart and clean it out because it looks an absolute scrappy mess at the moment. And I understand that if you're not used to soldering and you've tried to repair this, I'm not casting any no disrespect meant. It's hard to do, and I've only just about got to the stage myself where I can probably do it a little bit tidier, but that's after 4 years of doing this stuff. So do not feel bad, whoever worked on this, that it's a bit messy. Okay, so what I also might do on my whiteboard is, I suspect I'm going to, off camera, I'm going to draw out what's actually here, because I know where I've taken things from, and I'm going to draw out what I had before I go on to redoing it. So I can, you know, I can still take it apart and then I can make sense of differences between that and the diagram and sort of see if I can ascertain clearly from my own understanding why it wasn't working, because that's, for me, that's really important to have a sense of what's stopping it. But it'll take a bit of quiet time to sort of unpick this and draw out where everything kind of goes from and to. Right, see you in a bit. Hi there, it's a cold day at the moment, as you can tell, in the shed, but I'm looking at this Richie K Telecaster, and let me just make sure it's working. And I started off by transcribing the Fender wiring diagram onto the board, so I could just track it through. And the slight difference is that this is some sort of stylized representation of this actual switch or pot, so I'd rather kind of insert the actual pot in there so I know I can see actually what I'm dealing with. So I've tracked it across, and the first thing I've noticed is a funny little mistake on the thing. The grey wire actually comes from the neck pickup, not from the bridge, so that's a typo on their own wiring diagram. Anyway, so then I started looking at this and I wanted to map another version of it across there, and actually I got a certain amount of the way, and then I just got into an absolute mess over here, and my hands are freezing anyway. But I just thought, you know what, there's no point. I'm going to follow this, right, and I'm going to strip this out. The couple of things that I don't even know if this is salvageable. I think it's missing some tabs on here, some of the lugs. Don't know what's happened to them. In which case, if we can't find it, we're going to have to find some alternative, and this means this is going to get paused for a while while I wait for parts or search for parts. The other thing is the switch is the wrong way around at the moment. You see my kind of, that's as is, that's as the diagram shows. Now I never quite understand whether that makes any difference or not, and I'm sure it doesn't, but I'm going to reverse it to make sure. But the first most important thing really here is to clean up the equipment, because excuse me, to rewire again with this stuff is going to just require me to get shot of it. Now that means I'm going to have to take everything off, and that in turn means I'm going to have to have my fingers. You can see that it's starting off cold in here, but what the heck. So what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to use a screwdriver-y version of this just to make things a bit quicker. So don't make that the American one. No, that's the right one, isn't it? Yeah. I'm just going to drop all these saddles now. Now, remember I said a bit earlier on that the action will return to where I want it to as and when, which is absolutely fine. The reason I'm dropping these, by the way, is to get a straighter run in to unscrew them, to take them off, and we'll put them to one side. I'll put them in the order they came out in. There are two sets of shorter grub screws for the outside stuff. Anyway, this I have to say, this guitar has provoked a lot of interest on my Facebook page so far, and you know, Dan, if you ever watch this, it's very hard to be critical about stuff I see in front of me without being sensitive to, you know, not wanting to make somebody who's bought this guitar feel bad about it or feel silly or anything. You know, it's just is what it is, right? Keep the heating going, thank you. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, you know, apologies if it sounds critical. And somebody, I think it was Carl on my Facebook page, said, "Whoa, don't hold back, Sam. Don't spare the punches or something." And I'm not trying to be critical for the sake of it. I'm just in one sort of way, because I'm not a Richie K fan, and nor am I expressly a Fender fan for the sake of it. I mean, I've had some nice Fenders, and you know, I think I love the design of the Fender. I think Leo Fender was absolutely got a brilliant design. This shed will warm up soon. It's very good, this heater that I have in here. Alan asked me that. Anyway, so the point is, because I'm not a Richie K fan, particularly, that's not because I don't like him, I just don't know his work. Nor am I a Fender brand fan for the sake of it, although I really like Fender's designs from the 50s on. You know, I like what they did in the 50s, and I think it's the best. So they are probably the best design of guitars if you weigh them up against the Gibsons, my personal opinion. But because I'm not particularly attached to either, what it means is that in some ways some people get annoyed by it on my YouTube vids, and they go, "Oh look, you're working on a Richie Kotzen Telecaster and you don't even know the great man's work. How dare you assume you should grace the, you know, your shadow should fall on the great footsteps of them." Anyway, whatever. And some people feel that way, and okay, that's me one blasted spring down. It's always the way, isn't it? Okay, a black spring. Now I'm going to have to get my magnetic device out. Oh no, caught by the pickup. Yeah, so you know, some people just get freaked out. But as I say, I see so many different guitars, and I don't obviously take a fanboy's the insulting word, but you know, I don't take a kind of an aficionado's approach to any particular model, you know, because I'm not into any particular model more or less than any other. So that said, what I'm trying to get at is that it gives me, for as much as it represents a downside to some people who think I should be an expert in this model or Richie K or Fender's signature models or whatever, from as much as that may apply, what also applies on the plus side is that I don't have any expectations, or I'm perhaps not swayed by any you know, kind of dedication to the player or to the brand or whatever. So I do, as you can tell, I react to what I see in front of me. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave these here in this order, and when they stop being cold in this rapidly warming shed, I'm going to I shall stick them together with a piece of tape in that order, and that just means I can put them back in the same order, just for correctness' sake, and also, yeah, because I like doing that. Anyway, not so bothered about these because they're pretty standard. Ooh, and they're also very short. Yikes! Look at that. I've never seen a bridge screw so short. Now, anyway, so coming right back full circle, is it's been difficult to talk about this guitar and be honest about my reaction to some of it, without sounding hypercritical, but also in such a way that you know, it runs the risk of making somebody feel bad if they bought it, or you know. But what I'm reacting to is I'm puzzled, really, and I'm puzzled because I've got this heated up. This is JT's welding station. You know what I'm looking for. I'm puzzled. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? Just for now, I'm going to cut these. It's a little bit easier till I get this out and then clean everything up. Yeah, I'm really puzzled because as an outsider to this, what I'm seeing is just something I'm looking at, thinking, wow, this doesn't quite add up to what I'm expecting. Now, you know, and it's just me being honest. It doesn't quite add up to what I'm expecting. Simple as that. Okay, so we have a bridge ground here, and we have the jack socket earth grounds here. Now what I'm going to do on this guitar, because it's not working properly and there could be any number of problems, I am going to take this socket right out so that I can be sure that when I put it back in, it's interesting, what kind of, that's a house screw of some kind. When I put it back in, it's going to be working, so at least I know that bit's out of the loop. The problem with, I've said many times before, that one of the big problems with jack sockets is that because the gubbins end of them is hidden inside a tunnel, you can have problems with it and not even know, and never check it. This is absolutely soaked down to the ground in stuff. Now this appears to be, well, I don't know if this is the original thing at all, because many of the models I've seen don't have screw holes in them, or the ones I've seen online anyway. Okay, so we have here, you know, I'll give you a close-up actually because it is quite interesting. We have here a well-cut, well-routed set of shapes. Now if this was, okay, I'm jumping forward. So a lot of people who are commenting on this, with the best intentions, some people go, oh, that sounds like it's a fake or whatever, you know, and there's a bit of, everyone likes to get into controversy. So the fact they're having an interesting discussion, we're all having an interesting discussion about this guitar, doesn't mean Dan or Andrew, who sent it to me, that, you know, we're attributing any issues or motives to you or anything. It's just people are kind of curious, and they say what they think at the time, and you know, that's social media. So on the plus side about this guitar, although I'm not yet struck by what it is that makes people like this, that's a personal thing, I am also struck by some of the inexpensivity of some of the components and the finish, you know, like the bubbling chrome. Now I have seen online other people who own this guitar reporting exactly the same thing, that somebody said the chrome was bubbling within 3 months of owning it. So maybe Fender just did a thing with it, maybe it was meant to be because the period is correct, I don't know, whatever it is, but it's true, not just this guitar but others, at least one other, which is always a good start, at least one other has, you know, poor quality chrome. So it's not, you know, Dan, it's not unique to your guitar. So then there are people who then say, wow, for 1,600 quid plus I would expect better quality chrome, and that's just a totally different issue. So would I, frankly, you know, and that's just, well, that has to be how it is. Okay. Okay. So anyway, what we've got, just looking at this thing, we have a nice top. This is a nice top. It's a two-piece book matched top, and if you look in there, you can see that we have what's called swamp ash on the back under this. They call it brown, but people think it looks green under in photographs, but it's a brown sunburst, but it looks pretty green and yellow to me, but it's a nice, I quite like this colour. But we have what it looks like a 5mm, or at the thickest it's 5mm quilted maple top. And you know, people claim for it that it gives this guitar a kind of Les Paul characteristic, you know, that it behaves in a certain way. Now, I looked at the one that on a video that Richie Kotzen himself was showing off, which actually was different from this. It was his signature model, but it had some odd bits and pieces that this doesn't have. But one of the things it did have was loads of dents and scuffs, and I wondered for a minute whether this thing actually came with them as standard, you know, as part of a signature series thing that people do. But it doesn't seem like that, so I mean, I wouldn't know, right? I've not followed this guitar, I've not watched all the specs, I haven't watched all the videos and so on, so it's new to me and I'm trying to work out what it is. So look, the cut of these routes, this is not a typically Chinese horror story, right? This isn't a you know, a chop shop, chender shop, right? They would be kind of really crude by comparison to this. Well, not always, but you know, mostly when you open up a Chinese copy, you tend to find some real crude stuff in there. Also, it's just a nicely routed thing. It's quite precisely done in every respect. But you know, you also don't have any shielding inside here, so it's kind of thing that would probably be worth shielding this. I've got conductive paint. We also don't have any shielding on the inside of this thing here, although to be fair, that only covers a small amount of the hole, but there's, I guess, an argument that shielding inside there would also be good. So a bit of shielding covering that track. But again, it's a bit messy, the painted on stuff, although it's easy to use. It's preferable than doing it. The tin foil, copper foil looks great, but actually unless you buy the expensive proper stuff, you actually don't get a complete electrical circuit, because it's the circuit is broken, or the continuity is broken by the glue often, and it's very difficult to get them. Sometimes you can poke holes through or put little screws through to join up the pieces, but that starts to get really laborious. So the most cost-effective way is to use an electric conductive paint, which, you know, if I've got enough, I'll do. The brief for this is make this as good as it can be. Well, first of all, it's fix the electrics and make it as good as it can be. So I can tell you from what I've seen here on the electrics that the guy's attempts to put right whatever was wrong has changed this from what it was. Okay, it's definitely nowhere near quite right. And I, you know, as I said before, I totally understand when people are doing wiring for the first time or on something to help someone out. It can be a really daunting thing. I wouldn't fancy it, you know, and I've been doing it off and on for 4 years or so, and I still find myself daunted by the prospect, and I have to take a very, very logical approach. And partly it's because even still I don't fully understand what goes on, you know, why the pickup works the way it does. I get the principles, but you know, what happens when something grounds out? I have to really rack my brains and think, oh, that means that's happening. You know, even like something like a coil split, I really have to work it through. So what we've got here is a bunch of components that I need to clean up before we reuse. Okay, and I may actually replace this one. If I've got a 250k CTS pot, I may actually look at replacing that one. But this one's the one that concerns me, and I'm looking at this and I can't see the correct number of lugs on this. So how I'm going to make this work. This doesn't follow the little micro drawing, and I don't know whether they've been broken off in the various attempts to fix it or what's happened. So so basically I'm going to desolder all of these wires, and bit by bit I'm going to want to clean up every single one of these connectors or lugs or whatever, and just get it back to as clean a condition as I can, because once you've got something that is away from the original wiring, my recommendation, if you're even like me, unless you're an absolute expert, but if you're like me and a little bit still kind of, you need to follow things really carefully and logically, ploddingly I must say, then I recommend wherever possible, so providing you've got a wiring diagram you can refer to and that you should have some faith is a good one. I seriously recommend. Now this is a good iron, but it's a little bit small, meaning the heat transfer is slow. Yeah, I recommend starting again where if you need to understand what's going on. It's not the best time to jump up here, Morris, I have to say, but so eventually the heat transfer gets through to here, and off comes 1, off comes 2 and 3 bits. So a little bit slower than I would like to use to get, you know, pull existing wiring apart, but I do have another one that I could use as a sort of more of a crude instrument. So this, in a sense, as I said before, this is technically quite simple wiring. I mean, luckily I've got a good device. Horace, it's not the best time, really. Do you wanna, we've got a nice heater to go and sit by. Come on, there's a good boy. And I know the floor's covered in bits. Come on, down you come. Come on down. Come on, I want to pay you attention, but there's hot things over here and you won't like them. Don't show people your bum, it's rude. Come on, fella. Come on, you've got a lump of fur under here that I need to get to someday and help you untangle it. That's your winter coat getting a bit beyond itself. Alright? God, he's nice and warm. I'm warming my fingers up. And that's probably not very nice for you, is it? Because you're getting chilled. Come on, chum. Let's get you away from the hot soldering iron. Put you on the nice seat. Look, it's lovely and warm. Why wouldn't you just settle down there? Listen, if I didn't have to do this, I'd settle down there. Gorgeous. Lucky. It's a Sunday. Why? No, not a good time. Yeah, so there's great big claggy lumps of stuff everywhere, which is a bit of a horrible mess, but I'm going to have to do my best to clean all of this up, and some of it we'll just have to reuse, and some of it, like the micro switch, I may have to reuse. But having said that, if it is knackered, then we are going to have to go and look for an alternative. Now I'm going to just I'm using this. I'm keeping them in here for a minute just because it gives me a bit of space to pull on things, or a bit of solidity to pull things apart. Okay, so this thing is a tiny little switch arrangement with little tiny pointy lugs, and oh crikey, we have definitely lost some along the way. Now I don't know whether they've broken these off because they don't use them in this diagram. No, because we've got 5 and 5, and we've lost one in the middle. Yeah, we've lost the one we need. That's why it's not working. That's why it's not working. It's broken off. There we go. That's a game, set, and match for the minute. Okay, so this is where it's gone wrong, in possibly people having a go at repairing it. Not very good lighting. The middle, we've got 5 and 5. We've got one. They're a bit of a claggy mess. But what's important in this is that number, bottom row, as we see it here, bottom row number middle. Basically, this middle one is snapped off, as is the one next to it. So we're stuck now. Thanks, Morris. We're stuck. There's no way I can salvage this. I don't think so. Yeah, sharpen your horns. So I'm basically okay. So I would be in a situation. Here's the options, right? I'd be in a situation where this needs replacing. It's actually going to be quite difficult. I'll consult a couple of friends, expert friends, Ricard for example, who might be able to point me at something that will do this job just as well. Failing that, what I would recommend to Dan is do what actually a lot of people who own these guitars do, and that is revert it to a volume tone, and maybe even a coil switch, or a push-push that gives you the series parallel, right? You could do that with a push-push on a tone pot. So it won't be standard, but the problem with standard is you've got to find another one of these, and right now there's no way I've got anything like that, and this will be a difficult one to find a dead copy of because this is broken. Now I'm going to take some close-up pictures of this so that Dan and Andrew can see, but it will be certainly why it's not working now. And I'm also going to take off this one as well, because I think when all is said and done we should replace it with a higher quality one if we're going to do a good, or the best possible job. Hey, look, even this is, I mean, for goodness sakes, what is going on in here that is all worn off? I mean, oh, okay, I understand. Holy moly, I've just spotted something. Call me stupid. This is on back to front, so that's one reason why it looks a bit crappy. You can see the scratch marks through the back. Here's me looking at this, taking it. Of course this is back to front, or upside down I should say, not back to front, upside down. But if you went back to this, you'd still have a great big worn patch on here, which is that would technically be which way around is it? That would be the, holy cow, that would be the volume this way around. So the volume's got worn from use, and then I think somebody who's been repairing this has got it back to front. Thanks for freezing me, chum. This ain't going to work, Morris. I really need to stay warm. Come on, this ain't fair. You can stay, but you've got to just settle down and chill out. So I'm going to need to box up or store away all this stuff until we work out a solution. But like I say, it's not a catastrophe, because the simplest, yes son, he's ripping my trouser legs now. The simplest way to get this playing and sounding great and playing great, I've done the setup part. For a quick turnaround without any more hassle, I would recommend converting this to a volume tone setup, a standard 3-way, and possibly either a coil split if you want, or even a series parallel switch. But basically using a volume and tone pot, a push, something like that. But so this is, you know, but this is better because it doesn't reveal. I couldn't have known this, by the way, because the screws were covering these countersinks, or sorry, they would have been covering the countersinks anyway, so I couldn't really see up close that they weren't sitting there. They just looked like they were badly... come on, Morris, I can't have you here. You've got to go down. They just looked like they were badly seated, but actually on closer inspection now is because the plate was back to front. And actually, I have to say that makes the quality of the chrome on there a lot better. As a finish, it's not bubbling much. A little bit, but what's really weak is you can see the loss of the chrome under there. It's already worn off. Anyhow, so that's all going to go in there. That's all going to go in there. Those are going to go in there. All these bits are going to go in there. I'm going to photograph. This is I'm not sure even if this is the original one, but I'll take some pictures of this too, so that we can just do a check online and see if this is the original one that came with the guitar. I can probably search by the little number on the side here, but I mean it just doesn't look impressive for a 1700 quid guitar. Now this is the important one. I'm going to get under the light here. Let's put it in the correct way? Downwards, yeah. So I obviously can't get too close up, so I'm going to take a picture of it and then zoom it up afterwards, so we can see that this is the... That's not even in bloody focus. Oh, why? Oh, what? Yes. The trouble is, you get too close, you don't get it at all. Let's try again. Right, stay away, keep your distance, and zoom. Be prepared to zoom in, friend. Okay. So this is what real time. There you go. That's your lot. Check that out. Ew! You can get a better view of that. So that's an act. We don't have access. They just literally don't have access to that middle pin. Okay, that's not the end of the world. What I'm also going to do is borrow a little bit of this sticky tape. Now these have condensated themselves into shape. I'm going to fit this nice bit of tape. Always handy, right? Do I know which way around? Yeah, there's only one way around it can go, so that goes in there. So that just keeps it in its original order without any messing about. This isn't, by the way, the pot that came off there. It is a nice quality CTS, but that isn't. Okay, so on the inside here we've got what appears to be DiMarzio. Well, it is DiMarzio, and it's all in good order. There's nothing wrong with that pickup. According to this, I'll just do a quick test on the outputs on it, but it looks in good shape, as does this one, although I can't work out. Yeah, I do, because that's what you break, that one, right? That's my theory. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud. Okay, so right now there's no point me doing any more on the soldering, so that's going to go off on this guitar. That's going to stay out of the way safely. This is going to, I haven't got a plastic bag, so I'm going to wrap this in a little bit of tissue and just tape it up so I don't get any pull or stress on the wiring. I don't want any bad things to happen to it while it's in storage. Okay, so I'm literally going to take that like that. You know, it's always a good insurance policy. Pickups are always vulnerable, so treat them like that. This one I can just stay here, although it's a bit of a pain. Do we need to do anything with this? And I don't think we do. I've just done something which is annoyingly silly. I've just wrapped this up, and while I was here I just wanted to confirm to myself that the pickup actually was showing the right resistance. Might as well do it while we're here. In the bin. Excuse me, kid. Just, you know, a thorough, solid, you know, make sure from ground up. So for example, the reason I'm doing this is because you might have seen, you might have seen on, no you wouldn't have seen, on JT's build recently for a guitar I made for him, right, I need a bit of, I'm going to need to restrict these back a little bit further when the time comes, but yeah, on JT's build I installed two brand new pickups, one of which was a hot rails in the neck position, and I went through the whole kind of wiring up thing, which is in a tight space is always difficult anyway, and it was quite complex because it had some switching and whatever. But anyway, I came to the end of it and something wasn't working, and it was frustrating because I rather foolishly, it turns out, assumed that I'd made a mistake, and I'm a cautious wiring person, so I probably over exaggerate my deficiencies, if you get what I mean. I undersell probably my experience in doing this, but you can see the example of that being that I immediately distrusted my own wiring. So I took it apart to try and get this thing to work, possibly twice in a row, by which time was getting incredibly frustrating and yeah, tiring, and I spent a long time trying to find out where I'd gone wrong. And in fact, the last thing I checked in the whole sequence was the pickup, and the pickup was actually faulty, and it only had one of the two coils working. So that's really annoying. Now this DiMarzio tells me that the red is the earth and the green is the hot. So the red and the bare are the ground, and the green is the hot. So clicking on this here, we should get a good reading. Okay, so we're getting, okay, that's interesting. We're getting an 8 point, let me just get this, an 8.3. I'm just going to write this down because that could be, what have we got? It's a rail, it's a dual, it's a humbucker, right? So, I can't remember what it's called. Is it the chopper? Yeah, let's call it the chopper. Could be the wrong one. Chopper is reading 8.3K. What I'm assuming in all of this is that this little pair down here is correctly connected. I'm assuming that, right? You never know, it might not be. So I'm just going to check outside of this extra bare wire. That's showing, yeah, 8.3. Okay, so I'm going to go and check along the way. I'm going to check whether this pickup is rated at 8.3, because if it's not and only part of it's working, we may have a broader problem. But an 8.3 doesn't mean, you know, humbucker doesn't have to be more than 8.3, right? I'm not saying that. I'm not surprised. It doesn't have to be a high output or high resistance pickup just because it's a humbucker. But I'm just checking. Now, if I reckon this is the Twang King in the neck position, I could be completely wrong. I'm sorry about the names. Kill me if you must. We're going to go black and white. Now, these are supposed to be pushback wires, but will they obey? Yeah, just about. And then they stick into your finger. Push back, please. Push back, please. Just about. So we're going to go white as hot, black as thingy. Good thing about DiMarzios, funny thing about DiMarzios is they're usually, they're quite often opposite polarity to many other manufacturers. Okay, 1040. So the neck is hotter than the bridge according to this. If that, well, whatever the silly names are, the neck is hotter than the bridge. The neck bone connects to the knee bone. Right, so I've got that recorded, and I'm going to take a quick picture so I can consult it inside in case I forget when I go and do some research into this. And that's about it for now, folks. I'm going to go and find out what Dan or Andrew wants to do. But as I say, I may recommend, for simplicity and ease, I may recommend that this is reverted to a standard use, which a lot of owners do, because you've now got yourself sort of hijacked, no, what's the word, mortgaged, enslaved to a grimy little switch that's broken. I'll take it in with me too because I need to check it, but that was a good start. So that's it for this session. See you later. Well, here we are. Sun goes down on a beautiful February summer's day in the land of Reloved Guitars. Pretty, ain't it? There's the remains of our once great ash tree, only half of it left, but despite that, still going to grow again this year. Here's the old outdoor workbench with my office, 2 office chairs as you can see, back out workbench, and back into the laboratory. Ooh. Right. Okay, so let's do it. Right, here we are with the Richie Kotzen Telecaster, and finally, after a lot of work, I have to say, no means an easy feat. I've got this beastie working again the way it should. I had a worry for a while that I was going to discover that the Fender wiring diagram was wrong, because in part it was. I don't know if you can see this, I probably mentioned this before, but that's definitely a misprint, so that would throw off a newbie who wasn't sure what they were looking at. But anyway, we ended up with replacing this switch, as well as replacing the rotary 2-position switch, both of which were broken, so that had to happen. But once I got that done, we only really got back to the original state of the problem, because both those switches got damaged in the efforts to fix it, which is hardly surprising, because once, you know, if you're not sure what's going on, like I said before, it's very easy to you know, do further damage, or, you know, get things, snip things and break things and whatever. Anyway, so the point about this was that once I'd got these components replaced, then we were back to basically square one, which was where the state in which caused the problem in the first place. And that I tracked down, which by the way, that was a kind of an earth or grounding hum, and I tracked that down to the grey wire, that grey wire not correctly referenced on there, but the grey wire that was attached to the neck pickup cover. And the purpose of that wire is to ground the pickup cover separately from how it's normally grounded, which is normally all in one. But in this case, because something to do with the switching, can't really describe it, but the switching demands, the rotary phase series parallel switch demands that you have a separate grounding for your neck pickup cover, otherwise it would be ungrounded and hum like hell. And the problem that Dan had is, after probably years of playing, or a year or two of playing, this guitar, that cover ground had come undone, although the curious thing was that it was still visibly hanging on, so it didn't look like it was undone, but it looked pretty weedy connection. So the connection, the electrical connection, was not good enough, so I've taken that off and redone it, and also enhanced or added shielding throughout, and I've grounded that shielding throughout by putting little jumpers across with little screwed in connectors to make sure that it's everything's grounded. So here we come right the way back after all this time to the whatchamacallits saddles, in the order that I took them off, and it seems like forever ago that I did this. Okay, here we are on this jolly evening. I'm just going to give these a little rub over to clean them. It's kind of difficult when you're putting things together like this, quite difficult to keep things clean Okay, that's brilliant. Time to get hold of the magnetic monster. Find me the missing parts. What have we got? Well, we've got a spring. We've got my missing screwdriver bit and a few other little bits and pieces, but not the screw, and that could be because it's not magnetic. So I'm going to have eyeballing look down there. So let me put you on pause, but then to do that I have to come around the back and poke you in a funny way. Hold on. That button is definitely broken, forgive me. Right, running again. Sorry. Thank you. Yeah. Hello. Here comes the missus. Say hi.
Hello. Got the washing dry.
Yay, summertime in Lamerton, February. Okay, I would like to switch off this camera, but I have to press the button in the middle inside because it doesn't work anymore. Hold on. Morris? Oh, okay. So he heard the sound of cat food bowls clinking, so that is the end of his interest in what we're doing. Anyway, okay, let's get this together again. Screwdriver, please. Screwdriver. That's too small. Where's the not too small one gone? Oh, maybe we can try again. Maybe we can't. Right, I'm just going to put these little beauties back in. I take it, yeah, that is one. Yeah, so we're going to replace all of these. Get the right end sound. Replace all these here. What's it? Now I can take my cue from where they've been thingied, intonated to or whatever, and this time I'm going to do this over here. So I take my cue from the marks on the bridge plate anyway, so we get pretty much a good start point, and we can do final tweaks afterwards. I've got specific strings here, slinky top, heavy bottom, so they say. Okay. Yeah. So this has been, yeah, it's been a long drawn out thing, feels like anyway, and it's primarily because I've had to just discover one after another the problematic parts, and then order them and wait for them. And you can't ever know until you figure out which bit isn't working. I mean, cleverer people than me would probably be able to do something clever with a meter and go, that switch is dead, get a new one straight away. But I'm not as clever as that, so no, I never claim to be. So I discover that through doing or trying it out in practice. And at that point, I realised I needed to get another one, which was really odd because the only place I could find it was in Poland. Now people said, why only Poland? I don't know, I just couldn't find it anywhere else. And the thing is, when you're trying to get a job finished for somebody, you don't say, God, there must be one somewhere closer to home. You just grab the one you see, as long as it's a decent, reasonable price. You just grab it and go because you want to get the thing finished and you want the customer to have their guitar back and in action. So I just grabbed it, and then of course it took best part of a week to arrive. But at least I knew I'd found the exact right original switch, which is a Goto made in Japan switch. Nothing particularly special, but it keeps the guitar absolutely original rather than putting on some other kind of sort of switch, which would have done the job, but it also would have left me slightly unsure of, you know, whether the wiring was correct or not. So the good thing about using the correct OE equipment, as they say, is at least you can be quite confident that either the thing is working or it's, you know, the diagram is working, or you can be fairly confident that there's a fault. But like I said, having found a typo fault on there, it's not massively reassuring. But it's like all of those things, is it? You know, it would take me probably quite some time to get through to Fender to tell them. And funny enough, I've done that kind of thing before, and quite often you don't even get any appreciation for doing it. You can get quite a snotty, I'm not saying they would, but sometimes you can get a fairly snotty response, I've found, and it's just my own experience. But anyway, so here we have it, ladies and gentlemen. We have these lovely brass knobs, which now will go back on here. And the thing with knobs, I was going to do this thing where I'm going to use my camera, 10% of flame. It's always the way, isn't it? Trying to clean this little Lindsay bit up. Yeah. Okay, so the moral of the story is 66% there, some percent here. Yay! If I can just get it into camera mode. Oh yeah. I was trying. You're kidding me. I'm not having much luck with this, am I? It's conked out. Anyway, the thing about putting this, I'm trying to find a pot. Spare pot anywhere? Spare pot, one kicking around, it's left over. Where's the original dead one? There it is. Right, see if we can do it on this camera alone. So when you're going to line up a screw-in pot, don't do it so that the screw sits crossways to the thread, crossways to the cut part, right? Do it in line with it, because if you do it this way, there's a chance that you'll crush those two together. Now with this kind of thing, it will probably work, it will hold it on there, but you don't really want to crush it, because then potentially it'll break at some point, because if you crush this a couple of times, or pull it apart or crush it or whatever, it'll eventually break, and not very far down the line. So the secret of this is to make sure that your screw thread is in the same plane or line of pointing as the split part. So, and that way you'll get a lot longer life, mate. So down to there, screw it in. Now, often with pots, you have to make sure they actually work. Sometimes, if you set them too low, they won't work at all. Or they'll scrape as they go around, and it can be really annoying. This one's a bit sticky. And then we go down the same thing here, just line up the same direction as the slot in the split post thing. Okay. Yep. You can, feels a little bit on the grindy side. Let's try and lift it at just a tiny fraction. Yeah, that's just cleared it just off the deck. Right, so everything about this is looking really good. A bit earlier on, off camera, I fitted the ground anchors, the ground loops from basically to ground the painted cavity, the shield, the Faraday shield it's called. Anyway, Faraday cage. So I hooked up all of those cavities with some joiner wires, and that was not difficult, but I had to be careful to make sure they fit in place. And one thing about this, as I noticed, is that this, brilliant, this stay out of the way, this pickguard is a little bit off line, so to make sure that it fits okay, I'm just going to need to slap these off and try and move it around a little bit, because I want to get this neck heel in without any pressure. There are 2 new screws in here because I replaced the original ones, some of them that came out of the jack socket. I put new ones, or rotated some of these round so they were a bit fatter and gripped a bit better. Those other ones were, I've left them out, they were a bit crappy. Now I'm taking these all back out so I get a bit of movement back out of the scratch plate. There isn't a lot, but that's just enough there to get the neck in. So I'm just going to line the neck up first. Let me just check something here. Right. Okay. So line the neck up. I'm going to lift it up. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the plate, I'll put 1 or 2 screws back in, and then do the pickguard screws up again. So let's put this on a bit of a increased torque. There we are. Make sure it's nice and snug. That's just 2 for the time being. Now it may be that once we put strings on, we might want to slightly adjust the position of the neck, the alignment. So this is a little bit not off the mark, but it puts the screws just a little bit more under pressure. See, they don't want to go quite the clean way in, but got the low torque as low as possible on here. But that's yeah, it's not the best fit to begin with. It should be fine. So yeah, having done the ground connections across to all the cavities, I plugged this in a minute ago and it was completely silent in all positions. Well, it made pickups were working, but there was no ambient hum, which was great. Okay, all good. Right, now I'm going to just put these other 2 in for a minute, and then we just have to be aware that if we need to make an alignment adjustment, we have to slacken them all off and pull the neck into line, get the strings where we want them, and then put them in tight at that point and commit to that position. There's a lot of leeway you have with a Strat or a Tele neck anyway, so it's pretty good. Now this has been so long in the doing, what I now have to remind myself is that way back in the mists of time with this guitar, the first thing I did was, if you remember, the setup part, so that's ready to go. We're just basically ready to restring now, and then the only thing we need to do is to do the intonation, or stretch the strings out I should say, and then set the intonation, and we should be ready to go. But I'm very pleased to have got there finally. I think I threw the original rotary switch out. It's in the bin over there, or actually it's gone out. But anyway, you can see in the photographs on the Facebook page, you can see the damage. A couple of the lugs had broken off basically, so that's why it wasn't working. I'm going to put all these through. Now, this is a chunky bottom end 52 or something. I'm hoping that it's the same gauge as we had on originally, because that's what I did the setup with. But if it isn't, if it's gone up a gauge or anything, then I'll have to be ready to do any widening with the nut files necessary. I had been having an interesting discussion about nut files. I ordered some inverted commas cheap Chinese ones to test against some Hosco ones. Now Hosco are about 70 quid a set, and they come in 3 files with 2 sides per file, or 2 gauges, one on either side. And it's really interesting that those files, even the Hosco ones from Japan, seem to provoke quite a lot of controversy. You know, so it ranges from some people who just say they're utter rubbish, garbage, and you shouldn't use them, blah blah blah, up to, well, some people who say that not only are they utter garbage, but well, the Chinese files are garbage, the Chinese alternatives, or copies if you like, but some people say that the even the Hosco ones are garbage. Now Hosco is a pretty well respected brand of tools and stuff, so it's quite interesting to hear that described that way. But anyway, I'm going to try them out and see, and I think, as with a lot of things, I have a suspicion that it's not going to be as cut and dried as some people I think would like it to be. I think some people are very adamant that they're garbage, those files. Now I've already used, not on this guitar, but I've already used the Hosco files, and they've done a pretty good job. So we have, what we have here is the little string tree that came with this guitar. Now I know it's gold, and I'm going to have a look at using a it's quite a low down one, so I'm going to sand this down, and we're going to go with a low down. Might as well possibly still use the gold screw. That would be quite useful if we can, just for the sake of, will it fit? Yeah, that will fit. So we'll lower this down on a bit of sandpaper, yeah, sanding block, and this is, I recommend this for tuning stability. Now I know it's the only bit about the guitar then that will look non-standard, but I think that's worth it. Now this is my recommendation, so I hope that it's something that Dan appreciates the difference that it brings. So I'm just taking this down to a lower level. The reason I go with these is that I find that the metal string trees still cause a little bit too much friction. You know, and having invested in a good setup and doing everything to make this guitar play well, and it's not a cheap fix that we've done really, it's been quite a bit to figure out and sort out, but having put this right, then it seems a shame to, you know, having done the nut and adjust it and everything, it'd be a real shame to leave any, what do I call it, friction and grippy sitting down wonky. Yeah, and you know, I'll send the thing back so that Dan can replace that if he wants. Now this golden screw is just sitting a little bit off. I wonder whether I could use a steel one. I don't really want to go too much bigger, put a big hole in, but we want it to be quite low. What do I really want? I want this to work better, but it's just going in a bit far. Do I have any tiny washers that would do the job? It's just, it'll be fine. It's just holding it a little bit wonky for the time being. Let's see if I can get it to sit nice and straight as it goes down. Yeah, tiny bit wonky. Come up a bit. Is that because it is? I cut it down that way. I think I probably cut it slightly unevenly. Just have a quick look. Yeah, that's why I have done it uneven. It's not the screw, my dear. It is this. Difficult, as you can see, to manoeuvre such a small piece of plastic without going all over the place with it. Can't even hold it, you see. Really is difficult to hold on to. Now to see what bit's what. Okay, we're a bit up at this far end. A bit far up this end still. Eventually you just run out of material, so I've got to get it right at some point. That's pretty close. You could try and put it in a vise and do it that way, but I think that would be pretty fruitless too. So you just need it to sit reasonably tidily. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so here we go. One wing winder, string winder. Now I've got one replacement one, but somehow I want to go back to my familiar one. Okay, so my standard stringing method is going to be, first of all, let's get all these lined up straight. A bit of tidying up, pre-threading preparation work makes things easier. To get all the lines, all the holes lined up, we can just go straight through. So, important thing with a string through, now I think this is too big for this nut, so we're going to have to, we're going to have to make some adjustments here. So that gauge isn't the same as what was on the string when I did the setup, which is not a problem, it's just to be aware that we're going to need to adjust. So anyway, I pull back a fret's worth, wind on, and go over the loose string first time round, and then the second time round back under. And at this point, it's a bit difficult to do actually, but before we go all the way around and get tangled, I'm going to cut off the excess and then tighten it up. So, like I say, we're going to have, this will be stuck, no doubt about it. Okay, so now this one is, yeah, just about fits. Won't be a massive amount of adjustment, but that 52 will throw it slightly. Yeah, so with a string through or a tremolo block, make sure you pull up at the base first to get that ball end up through. Now chances are it could drop back down there again just as you slack off there, but just be aware that you want to make sure that at all times as you're tightening up, it is up through there. Now this way is, it's a bit clumsy this because I'm cutting before I tighten up under tension, but there we go. And yeah, I'll be looking forward to getting this dispatched on Thursday. I'll finish it tonight, well now, and then test it and let it settle for a day. And that's one of the things I've made a mistake with in the past, and that's been too much of a hurry to get something out. I always really prided myself on being, able to do a quick turnaround so that the customer doesn't have to be without their guitar for long. I know what it's like, when it's your #1 axe and you need it back. But I found out the hard way that that's not the best service for the customer, or certainly for them or for me, because occasionally you get a small movement or settling of the neck, particularly in the changes, in the minute changes in the neck relief. Once you've kind of done it all and set it all up, there can be some small change a bit later. And when we're dealing with usually such low actions, such precise actions, then it's not uncommon for that to result in what was at one point a beautiful playing action, then be, suddenly be buzzing out or something on maybe on the high bends or something like that. So it can be, with such precise low actions, it can be very susceptible to post adjustment movement, in which case you know, a day or so extra to just let it hang and acclimatise, and you know, to be able to come back to it then and say, okay, is this still, you know, still playing well? Great, now I feel comfortable putting it back in the box and packing it up for transit. Now this, what's going on here? This is sitting on the fret at this end. Okay, so all the actions down that end are wrong. Just let me worry for a second. Got to go and readjust all these. I don't remember doing anything with them when we took them off, but it's a while back now, so I must have. Yeah, I think the black, what do you call it, this thing, string tree will do nicely. I mean, there's a lot of other black bits of trim on here. Anyway, of course, I'll send back the original little gold clip if that doesn't work. Okay, so if you recall, when I did the setup, I did it with a low action, or we set a low action. Stains, but the finish isn't perfect condition, as we know. Yeah, when we did the setup, I did it for a low action, and it was the sort of typical low action that I like to set. So with this sitting here down on the deck, I can now dial up the action that I prefer, and then I'm just going to aim to sort of home in on this to begin with, and then work from that. So I'm just, yeah, I'm just eyeballing these right now. And then we'll come back and measure them more precisely. There's quite a lot of adjustment going up on its stilts here. We'll take these up to the same sort of height. Looks good. And then we'll come back and do them one by one. Now you'll suddenly be able to hear everything playing mercifully. Can't quite spin that round very well, but okay, we're keeping in mind that this low E is going to be sticking in that slot, pretty certain of that. Okay, so I'm going to get me a measurer. I would say that's pretty much dead on 1.5 on the low E, which is where I like to go. And the idea would be to go kind of 1.4 on the next one, and then 1.3, but not quite that actually, but stepping it down from the 1.5 across to 1.2. So reality, the next one would look about the same. The next one would be not far off. It's a very small gradient. We're only going about 0.3 of a mil across 6 strings. So, and sometimes when you're doing this, you can end up by eyeballing it quite well. So I do it to a measurement first, rough as close as I can get. That one's too high. As close as I can get, and then what I'll do is I'll sort of see how they look as we go across the 6, and you can sort of see when one's really unhelpfully out of kilter with the rest. That's too low. That's still a bit too low. So 1.2. We want really a 1.2 and a bit. It's very hard to get that precise, to be honest. We're just I'm not guessing exactly, but we are right at the edge of what's measurable. Okay, so down the end here currently we've got just a bit too much. 1.5, go down a bit, go down a bit, go down a bit, go down a bit. That looks about right. Now, a little gentle tug, and we're going to go for a tune. Or tuning. We'll see how we'll get a feel now as we do this tune up. We'll get a feel, tuning and stretching. We'll get a feel for how tight that slot is with the low E and maybe the A. Wow. Feels great. I need to cut my nails. I do, they're getting too long. And for that, I need my special nail file. Part of my essential beauty kit. Very simple, just helps you. There's a very small range of height that if your fingernails are above, just make it really hard to play notes on the guitar. Some people seem to play with hugely long fingernails, but I can't do it. Okay, so let's just double check what we've got. We've got hardly any relief at all, in fact almost none. We have got at the far end, I'll just check it again with my grandpa's eyeballs. I don't have any grandpa, so it's not being disrespectful. Feels nice, and it's really low too. Okay, so we have 1.4 maybe. We have 1.3-ish. We've got 1.5, so that one goes up too high, and you can probably just about see it. So let's drop that a little bit. Yeah, no, still, no, that's okay. Fraction high. Put too much relief curve into that. Not relief, radius. Followed an imaginarily high radius. Okay, just over one, just over one, just over one. Cool. So, having done that, now my need is to stretch the strings. Oh, the other thing is, let's check the alignment. The alignment's good, so I will not need to adjust the neck in any way. I mean, that is one thing that's good about this guitar compared to some of the American Elite Strats that I've had recently, Fender American Elites, all of which, or most of which, the few I've had, the necks were all misaligned considerably, whereas this is spot on, which I'm pleased to say. So we're dealing with 10s at the top here, so I've got to be careful not to break them. Okay, so we will no doubt be out of tune, as we'd expect that as we pull out the slack. I think this neck should have a whiff of relief in it, I've got to say. It just appears to be a little bit flat for the kind of basic principles that the strings need some room to spin, particularly with a heavier gauge bottom strings that we've got here. So I'm going to just make a small adjustment, and this is where it comes in useful to have that day of rest for the neck to definitely stop moving before we send it back. Maybe I was wrong, maybe that is the correct gauge that was in there. I just haven't heard any pinging or any sticking. It's really direct. It's got a nice feel to it, I have to say. I will give it that much. I know I've been a bit, critical of the fittings of this guitar, insofar as that it's not been that. I didn't find it that astonishing to look at. The kind of hardware and stuff, but it's actually. Not bad. So this thing, that's interesting. It's working. It's sitting a little bit canted to one side, but it's doing the job fine. Obviously, it's changed. Now I'll go back down to where it was, so at least it can't move any further. Let's do what? Oh. I've just done. There's a lump of plastic sitting on here. Come on. Have I got something? Maybe I can do it with this better. I really need that to be straight and flat. I can see a little unevenness on this side. It's pretty difficult to flatten something you can't actually hold properly. But hopefully we're there. I mean, you can see what I'm aiming to do here is just to keep the original screw in there. I don't want to widen the hole or anything in case Dan wants to, when maybe sell the guitar at some point, wants to put the original back in. We don't want it to be loose. So this approach here allows us to use the same thing, screw. So it's difficult putting the damn thing in when you've got the strings on. Come on, in you go. There and there. Thank Push harder. That hole looked quite big anyway, like it's worn at the top. I don't know why that would be, but I'm not sure it hasn't had anything changing things over. But the strings are back at the same level they were, although it looks to me a bit extreme an angle. It's how the original holds them, but okay, one more go on the stretching side of things, and then after that I'll concentrate on making a very small adjustment in the neck profile, the relief curve. Just add a little whiff of whatchamacallit, curvature. I'm not sure what the truss rod is on this or which size it uses, so I'll have to be a bit experimental. Hardly detuned there, so we're pretty close now on tuning stability. Those will move more because I've slackened them off. Yeah, they're pretty flat. In fact, it's dead flat. There's no curvature at all. Let me see which of these things goes in there. Let's say experimental. Nope. Which one of those? One of those. Is it the one that I keep in my mini kit? Could be. No. Is it the US style? Big chunky one. Yes, it is. Okay, so I'm going to take a bit of that, tiny bit of that flatness off of there. That's the tiniest amount. Not even sure I'd expect to see any adjustment there. Tiny bit. I'm going to take that in with me and just check it over the next day. Now, the one thing I want to do now is to do a quick intonation test. And we'll do it with just the electronic tuner. I don't really want I'll put it on the strap because I need that jack socket not to be bashing against the desk bench, so we'll do it on the strap. Okay, so things still to do: intonate. Also going to I'm going to tighten up the neck things, those things, screws, stop this from falling off. Right, turn it around where I can see it head on. Okay, one's showing just a fraction long, so I'm going to shorten it a tiny bit by pushing backwards counterclockwise. What I'm feeling as well is that's high compared to the next one, so I need to just check the action on that. It's a little bit high still. You can feel it. Funny that. It's funny, sometimes that's the only place you can tell the difference. Yep, I like it. Okay, so the final thing to do will be to tighten up the neck screws. Just quick double check that nothing's touching anything else. Bridge. Remember, right, going what for me is weeks ago, but for you is only a matter of, well, mere hours. Remember that this had quite heavily bashed frets. Set quite low. Did I adjust these at all? I can't quite remember if I did or if I didn't, but I'm going to make a small adjustment. Of course, Dan can retweak these to his heart's content if they're out of kilter with. I use that a lot, that phrase. If they're out of alignment with how he likes it. Relief, still practically none, so it feels very low all the way. Dimarzio. Listen to that. Single coil. The only noise you're hearing is the digital artifact. Nothing. Lights all over the place, nothing. That's on high gain single coil. Of course, if you hit it, the amp makes a load of hissy, you know, digital amp noise. It's modelling, right? Take any output from the strings away. It's not bad, is it? Anyway, that's it. I am done with this beautiful thing. Verdict for me, glad I was able to sort it out. Dan, I hope you enjoy playing it. Remember, if it's too low, and for some people this is too low on a Telecaster, if it is too low, obviously you can go up in action just by messing with the saddles. I've set it at its lowest action, which is kind of where I aim for each time, and you can make adjustments from there upwards if you wish. I hope you enjoy it. A very interesting case. I'm glad I was able to get it working, and yeah, let's have a look. Just looking at these two things, tiny amount of adjustment. I'll tweak this in the house. There's one or two little action tweaks I want to do. Tiniest of, which will result in tuning retweaks as well. And like I said, practically no relief, so I'm going to put another little swish of relief into this while I'm in the shed right now, so I can move, so I can see it, see any adjustment. Very small. It's quite stiff, I seem to recall. But we want to give it back a little bit of a relief curve to let those strings move without. It's better. Yeah, that's better. That's better. That's better. Just instinct tells me, and playing it, feeling it. There we go. The Richie Kotzen Telecaster from Fender. Verdict on it, like I've said all the way through this, it struck me as really odd. I couldn't see where the value for this or the price of this guitar was. However, I see online that a lot of people who have this guitar really rate it and value it, and if that's the case, then good for them. With these strings on and the way it's set now, this actually feels great. I don't know how much more worthy it is than a lot of other Telecasters, but it's nice in this condition now. So you know, it's one of those things. If it's what you like and it's your money to spend, go ahead and do it. Is my answer to all of that. I guess the thing that I would still hold to be true on this is that if you're Fender and you are charging a premium price for something like this, then why not put some decent pots in? I've replaced that grey thing with, you know, a CTS pot. Now, whether or not there's any actual difference, you just know that somebody's going to look under there and they're going to see a zinc alloy pot, and you know, you might as well go with something that when they take that off you can see the brass. Anyway, that's just a little detail, but I guess if it doesn't really change it, I'm also of the opinion all of this quality, so-called quality blingy part stuff is a bit crap anyway. But I suppose you've got to play to what your customer base expects. This for me, and clearly Dan has played this and loves this, so this has done well for him. For me, on the plus side, this the intonation was right on this, made that easy for me. The sound's great. I like the big chunky neck. And I like the fact that neck is really well fitted and well aligned from the sort of outset, or by default, which is, you know, as I said just now, it's quite unusual for a lot of these things. So all not bad at all, and I'm sure this would be a great guitar to gig with, and hope Dan enjoys many more years with it. Okay, so thank you for watching. It's been a bit of a weird one, but we've got to the bottom of the bits and pieces that were wrong with it, all coming from people trying to help and solve a grounding problem which arose. And the issue about grounding problems is usually they're sort of the result of movement. Now in the case of this, the ground wire, the little grey ground wire, had come apart or just ceased to be connected right up there on the what that thing is called, the cover of the single coil. So it's not really something I could probably attribute to movement so much, but anything else that moves in a the guitar's being played really hard at gigs or in band situations or whatever, you can expect to find ground problems happen because connections just come apart and suddenly you've got a problem. And for the guys who tried to put this right for Dan in the first place, it's I've got every all hats off to you, because it is, even having done it a couple of years off and on now, it's still not an easy thing to do. So it's very, very easy to get completely confused by what is going on, because it's like a black magic unless you have a particular proclivity for it, which I don't. So the fact that I've been able to kind of plod through and figure things out is just it's only born of a little bit of confidence from having kind of messed up many times along the way. So absolutely no criticism of the guys who try to fix that. But glad that I was able to get to the bottom of it, and there we go. We'll take that indoors and get that hung up for a day, and then we'll check it tomorrow. Thanks for watching. On to something else now. Oh, I've got to go around the back and turn this off the clumsy way. Goodbye.